32 and 33 are consent. Okay? Just so everybody's up. Okay, thank you. Yeah, because some of the post it because the consent item and somebody have to pull it, right? So. Okay. So we don't have to vote?
You've got something. And then procedure bylaw helps housekeeping to do that.
I'll call this Committee of the Whole meeting to order. You, members of council, you have your agenda before you. There are some additions and corrections, the particulars of which our CAO has outlined earlier. Could I have a motion, please, to add the additional items on the addendum? Councillor Emanuel, Councillor Kerwin, all those in favour? That is carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Being none, what I'd like to do is to go forward to the consent items, and then we'll deal with the deputations. So are the items that are listed as consent that members would wish to deal with separately? Regional Councillor.
17 and 21.
Thank you. Councillor Sponga.
17, but it's been pulled. So.
Okay. Thank you. Any other items? Okay. Can I have a motion then to adopt all other consent items? And to be clear, we're dealing with items number 3 through to 26, item number 28, 32, and 33.
Sorry, I don't think it does, but can you check with staff? Can we just check with staff if 36 needs to be pulled along with 17, or is not necessarily the case?
Okay. Yeah, we related it back. Who's Farrar?
Mr. Mayor, the intent was that item 36 replace item 17.
Oh,
Yes.
all right, so pull them both then.
Yep. As with item 34, I think. No, that's all matter of public hearing. We're okay. Okay. Councillor Sponga.
Clarification as well, through Mr. Mayor to our clerk, whether item 29, there's nothing under action items, but there's a heading called motions.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if it's a consent item or if it's an
No,
action
it's not.
item.
We deal with motions
Separately?
separately as an action item. Okay? Okay. Councillor Emanuel, Councillor Sponga, all those in favor? That is carried. Okay, so we, with the exceptions of item number 17 and 21, which we'll deal with separately, let's hear from our deputants first. And our first deputation is Mr. Steve Foglia to address the committee with respect to the Accessibility Advisory Committee and its accomplishments. So this is also with respect to an agenda item that we have already adopted, but please let us hear about your progress. Mr. Foglia.
Mayor Van Buyden and members of council, my name is Steve Foglia, and I'm here as chair of the Newmarket Accessibility Advisory Committee. As you're aware, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act requires each municipality to create an Accessibility Advisory Committee. Newmarket's Accessibility Advisory Committee is composed of volunteers from the community, many of whom have some type of disability or work and provide care for persons with disabilities. The volunteers working to make Newmarket more accessible on our committee are Diane Bladdock-Willett, Ursula Redner, Wendy Williams-Gordon, Naeem Bacchus, and Laura Sharpenter, and of course our very own Jane Twinney. On behalf of these dedicated volunteers, I'm here to present some of the significant accomplishments of our committee over this term of council. Over the past 4 years, the committee has worked on a number of important initiatives. The Sidewalk Review Construction Guidelines. The committee began reviewing sidewalk construction guidelines in 2011 with the goal of improving sidewalks for people in wheelchairs by smoothing the construction bump and concrete edges within sidewalk features, making curb cuts so that visually impaired individuals can identify that they are approaching the end of a sidewalk. In 2013, Council amended the sidewalk standard that removed troweling around the expansion joints, making travel smoother and safer for those using wheelchairs and walkers. National Access Awareness Week. The committee continues to host successful National Access Awareness Week events in June of each year. The event this past June marked the 4th year of National Access Awareness Week in Newmarket and saw the continued growth of the event and the participation of local organizations, including the CNIB, the Canadian Hearing Society, the Ontario March of Dimes, among many other reputable groups. This year, activities included sledge hockey, wheelchair basketball, sensory experimental art workshops, interactive event, and other interactive events, and wheelchair dance as well. National Access Awareness Week festivities in Newmarket continue to grow each year, with plans already underway for the 2015 event. Facility audits. The committee identified 11 facilities that required accessibility audits or reviews in early 2014. To date, audits of the Community Center, Lions Hall, Magna Center, the Ray Trainee Recreational Complex have been completed. These facilities were prioritized due to their use as accessible voting locations in the 2014 election. Accessibility grants. The committee has worked with staff in the building department to complete grant applications related to accessibility upgrades. In 2011, the committee commenced work on the grant application for replacement of the front doors at municipal offices with accessible automatic sliding doors. And as you all walk through today, I'm happy to report they have been replaced this summer. Signalized intersections. The committee worked with staff to lengthen the duration of time between traffic signals in order to ensure that allotted time permits safe travel across intersections. Several intersections throughout the town, notably the intersections of Leslie Street and Mulock Drive, Leslie Street and Davis Drive, Yonge Street and Upper Canada Mall, have been adjusted to permit longer and safer crossing times. Review of plans. The committee provides feedback on site plans submitted to the town over its term. The committee has reviewed plans for construction projects, including the Old Town Hall renovation, accessible trail initiatives in York Region, and most recently, the committee reviewed plans for Newmarket's first off-leash dog park, and also attended the joint meeting between the Newmarket Accessibility Advisory Committee and the Region's Accessibility Advisory Committee to review plans for the new regional annex building. The committee also reviews the town's accessibility plans. In 2014, accessibility status update to the multi-year accessibility plan is on your agenda today and has been prepared for guidance, with guidance from committee and staff. The committee diligently works to promote awareness of accessibilities and abilities and to implement changes to benefit all, not just those with disabilities, in order to make Newmarket a fully inclusive community. Through those efforts, the committee has worked to reduce recreation fees for persons with disabilities, reviewed taxi service standards, and provided comments on Mobility Plus appeals panel review, and provided feedback on the town of Newmarket's website, among other measures. Looking forward to the next term of council, the committee hopes to continue working towards its goal to make Newmarket more accessible to all through initiatives including the implementation of ongoing public awareness campaigns comprised of written education and communication pieces. Continued growth of National Access Awareness Week celebrations, including possibly establishing an annual Accessibility Award to be awarded during National Access Awareness Week, the implementation of the Stopgap program, and to further support for internet voting for the next municipal election. In addition to this, through the support of a motion by Councillor Twinney, which is on your agenda today, the committee hopes to work with the town and province to realize amendments to the Municipal Act to permit other forms of meeting attendance for municipal accessibility committees, therefore making the Accessible Committee more accessible. I'd like to thank you for your support for the committee for over the past 4 years. I look forward to continuing to work with council on the accessibility-related issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions, Councillor Twinney?
Just a motion to receive and first.
Okay, motion to
Deputation.
receive, seconded by Councillor Sponga. Do you have any questions, Councillor Sponga, before we, okay? Motion to receive. Thank you very much. The fact that Council adopted the Accessibility Advisory Committee's recommendations and the plan unanimously as a consent item speaks very much towards the hard work that you put into the program.
Yes.
And on behalf of council, I'd like to say thank you very much for the hard work that you've done, particularly on a volunteer basis. And also, it might be appropriate for us now then to also take a look at the motion
Right,
that
that's-
we have before us, okay?
Vote
So,
on the-
We
all
have to
those
vote.
in favor of receiving the presentation? That is carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay,
Sorry,
let's
can I
bring forward.
just sort of thank Steve for all, just, make a comment. Thank you, Steve, for coming today and providing this update. I know how hard this committee works, like all our committees, but it really is. You guys are so involved, yourself and the rest of this committee is so involved in improving accessibility in the town of Newmarket, and we couldn't be done without all the work of this committee, so thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then with council's indulgence, let's go forward to the motion that was put forward by Councillor Twinney. Is there,
Do you want me to?
move that? Move
Yeah,
that?
well, I'll move it. Do you want me to read it out, or do you want me to? I'll
Might be
read it
good to-
out. Just, to give you a little bit of background, I think we've talked about this at Accessibility for some time, about the fact that the rules are, under the Municipal Act don't allow for any video conferencing or, sorry,
Clarify.
what?
Could I have you move the motion?
Okay.
Have a seconder, and then we'll
All
have the
right.
discussion for the
Okay,
motion.
all right, so I'll move the motion that the Ontario government consider the appropriate legislative amendments to the Municipal Act 2001 to permit telephone or video conference participation by appointed members of municipal accessibility advisory committees required by the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act 2005, and that this resolution be circulated to the Honourable Kathleen Wynne, Premier of Ontario, Honourable Brad Dewey, Minister of Economic Development, Employment and Infrastructure, Honourable Ted McKeegan, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Mr. Chris Ballard, MPP, municipalities in York Region, Durham Region, Halton Region, City of Toronto, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario.
Okay, and Regional Councillor Taylor is seconding that. Speaking to the motion, then
Right.
it's the mover. Thank you.
Just to get a little bit of background, I guess, on the motion, I've spoken many times at our committee meetings with regards to accessible. Sometimes it's not easy for people to attend the meetings, and it creates an issue with quorum, and how the rules perhaps in the Municipal Act are outdated and a bit archaic, with the fact that we don't allow for video conferencing. And then the next step, I guess, rather than just talking about it, because it has to be changed through provincial legislation, was to put a motion forward. So we're hoping that this is going to get some traction, and I'm proud that it's coming from this committee here in the town of Newmarket, and I'm sure other municipalities will be in favor of it as well. So we hope that we get support from other municipalities across Ontario to get this changed in the legislature.
Thank you. Regional Councillor is the seconder.
Yeah, just quickly say, I think it's a very good idea, and I think it'll be quickly seen for what it is by other municipalities and hopefully by the province. But also just want to say, as the representative on the Accessibility Committee for the past term, again, how much work that Steve and other volunteers on that committee, past and present, have put in a great amount of work. The last thing I'd say is that it's a really great opportunity for member council to sit on this committee. It really helps you to sort of see issues when they come up in town in a slightly different light, and it's a great learning opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion, any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Next item then is item number 17, and I believe we have a deputation. Item number 17 is the sorry? Okay. We do have one more deputation, so I'll call on Bessie Vlasos, and that is with respect to the bully-free community. Thank you. And permit up to 5 minutes for deputations.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Bessie Vlasis, and I'm co-founder of Bully Free Community Alliance of York Region, and I appreciate the time to speak to you today. Our organization is here for two requests. Bully Free Community Alliance of York Region continues to work advocating and supporting students and families who have been affected by bullying and help provide educational awareness to our community and beyond. Two of our main focuses are youth mental health and cyberbullying. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people after motor vehicle accidents, number one in non-accidental deaths. This is an astonishing statistic, yet people are often reluctant to discuss it, and this is partly due to the stigma, guilt, or shame that surrounds suicide. Youth mental health is an obstacle for parents, the school system, and throughout our entire healthcare system. Raising awareness and removing the stigma is important, and part of our work is to align and collaborate with key people and organizations who make a difference within our communities and beyond. Carol Todd lost her daughter, Amanda Todd, to suicide in October of 2012. She has created the Amanda Todd Legacy Foundation, and through that has requested cities and towns around the world to light up purple on October 10th, 2014, which is the World Mental Health Day. We request that Newmarket light up Riverwalk Commons purple, as well as any other key areas in Newmarket, to show our town's support for mental health and the tragic losses our country and communities have endured due to suicide. Now, our second request. Last year, Bully Free Community Alliance of York Region made a deputation to this council to request the town recognize and take part in Bullying Awareness Week, which is mandated by the by the Ontario government. And not only did the town light up Riverwalk Commons, we worked with councillors Emmanuel and Twinney to bring awareness throughout our town. But also Mayor Van Biden came and councillors visited a local elementary school and made a proclamation presentation to students and staff, acknowledging the third week of November as Bully Awareness Week. We've continued the conversations and awareness campaigns, collaborating with the Youth Recreation Centre and holding a successful Real Youth event in May. Moving forward, we have been able to collaborate and work with the Youth Recreation Centre in Newmarket and have a youth mentoring program running in January called Ahead of the Game, which is led by Toronto Argonauts football player Jonathan Hood. We were thankful to the town of Newmarket for their contribution and acknowledgement of Bullying Awareness Week last year, and we asked the town take part again this year and support our Bullying Awareness Week campaign, which runs the week of November 16th by lighting Riverwalk Commons blue, promoting it on the town's electronic signs, as well as releasing media notices. Thank you for your continued support.
Thank you. Any questions or clarification? Being none, then motion to receive. Councillor Kerwin and Councillor Sponga. And we also have recommendations under item number 2, and that the town of Newmarket make the proclamation of Mental Health Day November 16th, and November 16th and 22nd is Bully Awareness Week. Moved by Councillor Kerwin, seconded by Councillor Twinney. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now before we go on to items number 17 and 21, it's appropriate that we acknowledge the attendance of one of our colleagues from the town of Witchard Stouffville, Mayor Emerson. It's good to have you join us, and if there's anything you learned from this process, or if there's any feedback that you can help us with improving our process, that certainly is welcome as well. So I appreciate you being here. So let's deal with the item number. Yeah, well, I was going to go to item number 17, but with item number 17, we do have a deputation, Mr. Burholtz. So, Mr. Burholtz, if you come forward, please. Thank you. We permit up to 5 minutes. Would that be sufficient, or should I ask council?
I can do my best. We may have a few extra. It may go a little longer if that's okay.
All right, we'll let you know when we hit the 5 minutes, and then
Okay.
we'll go forward from there. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come here and speak to you today. Just as an agenda, the 3 things I'm going to cover is a quick introduction, and there's 2 items within the zoning bylaw that you're going to be looking at today, the accessory structure maximum height and parking ratio that I'd like to speak to. So this image is a sneak peek of what you'll be receiving this week in advance of our site plan review committee next week. We're very excited about the improvements to urban design we've made to the site plan since we first submitted, based on integrating staff's comments. We've come a long way since our initial design. The two items, other than the two items I will talk about, we are in compliance with the zoning bylaw as drafted by staff. As I said, the first item has to do with the accessory structure in the zoning bylaw, and the second is to do with the parking ratio. Staff has recommended 1.1 units per stall. We have provided 0.96 stalls per unit, and I will be asking council to consider adjusting the bylaw today so we're in full compliance. So on the second slide, just a quick review. This is our site plan. I won't go into any detail. And this is the parking plan, which is at the south end of the site. This is the elevation from north to south. So you're looking at the east elevation here with Davis Drive at the right side of this picture. And then the area I'm going to be talking about is at the left side. So zooming in, here's a wider view of the whole parking structure. So you see the extent of the height is at the top, on the top right here, which is the top of our stairwell. And then if you zoom into this area, you see this. And what you're seeing here is that the distance between the average grade and the top of the stair roof is somewhere between 5.16 and 5.18, depending on which architect got right. But it's somewhere in that zone, which is above the 4.6 maximum allowed by the zoning bylaw. So basically, the reason we're here today is because this was raised for the first time on Thursday, which was well after we had submitted. It came up after we submitted for site plan, and it was something that just wasn't caught. But we did realize it's an important enough issue to bring forward. We are also awaiting grading information from the town's consulting engineer that hasn't come in yet. That could, in fact, and the grading information has to do with the southern road, the connection that we are trying to work with the town. It's one of the holding provisions. So the bottom line on this is that we would like to extend the height maximum from the current 4.6 up to 6.6. And staff, I believe staff, if we had caught this earlier, would most likely support this, but I'll let them speak to that. The second issue that we had deals with the parking ratio. And we're requesting the parking ratio be reduced for two reasons. The empirical data that the number of spots needed for this type of building, particularly due to the anticipated resident profile, is much lower than the 247 spots required by the town zoning bylaw. In addition to seeing the neighboring properties with vacant spots, we also have Kim Nystrom here from Cole Engineering, who did our traffic and our parking study, to answer any questions. I'm going to go quickly through this while we're up here for the deputation. Also, the other reason is that, as we've mentioned before, this rental building, to make the numbers work, we had to decide not to do underground parking. So one of the main reasons is the site plan as it stands right now with one level of deck parking. Our land area is very limited, and so we have squeezed in as much parking as we feel we can get. We even lost a couple spots, or 4 spots, during our implementation of the town's engineering comments. So we provided this 0.96 stalls per unit, and we've assumed the need for a 0.1 visitor, which is the zoning bylaw. That would allow 0.86 for the residents. And initially, our parking study evaluated 2 comparable rental buildings near Huron Heights and Davis, which are inferior locations and don't have the benefit of Viva, which will be complete by the time we're done our building construction. The second last column here on this chart indicates the peak demand as surveyed, excluding visitors, and you'll see in the 2 Huron Heights buildings, they're well below the 0.86 that we're proposing. At 0.6 and 0.78, Kim's firm did an on-site evaluation that led to those numbers. We were asked by staff to also look closer at building on Calgane, and we had one of the buildings come forward with an anonymous parking study that Kim also undertook, which showed a peak demand of for residents of 0.84, and that particular result is extremely accurate, as it has a controlled parking situation where you can only get in if you have a parking pass. They're underground, and all spots need to be permitted. Staff remained adamant that of the 1.1, So we further contacted Housing York to get a sense of their parking data, and they provided us with a number of statistics, and we've selected the four most relevant statistics. And it's important to note that some of those buildings, most of those buildings have components that have rent geared to income, such as Mackenzie Green, which is 50%, Tony Wong, which is also 50%, I believe. But the numbers, as you see, are all much lower. Some, in some cases, there's a lot of seniors in the buildings too, so the numbers are as low as 0.5, but none are above the number we're proposing. So this is the extent of the data we received from Newmarket and from the region. And in addition, and Kim can answer any questions on this afterwards if you'd like, we did a survey of the TTS data in Zone 2613, which is this area near Lorne and Davis Drive, which showed a vehicle ownership in this area of 86%. Additionally, Kim provided to staff two surveys, one based on surveys of apartments in Toronto, which showed a peak resident demand of 0.35, and also a survey of condominiums in Vaughan, which showed a peak resident demand of 0.84. We also dug up in the process of, in part of the York Region information provided, they had quoted something in a report done for the City of Toronto that was used by the City of Vaughan in assessing their parking requirements, and they're updating their parking zone, their parking bylaw. And the quote that I took from there was, the empirical data reveals that auto ownership dwelling unit ratios for rental apartments are generally about 75% of that of condominiums, provided locations are well served by surface transit. And this building does qualify, once the Viva is completed, as being well served by surface transit. Finally, the last piece of, well, a couple more slides. I don't know where I am in the 5 minutes. How am I doing? Getting there? Gone.
Continue on.
Okay. So we took a different approach, because what we found after we received the Housing York data, it became clear that they are, in different municipalities, including Richmond Hill, looking at parking ratios differently. So, and the site that we were particularly looking at was the Richmond Hill Housing Community Hub on Yonge Street, which provided, instead of a blanket ratio of 1 per 1 on units, or 1.25 per 1 unit, they had a they looked at specifying the parking ratio based on the unit size and or the number of bedrooms. So we dug back into the Toronto data and found that there was a study done by Consult in support of the Toronto parking study in 2006 or 2007, and I took their numbers, and just to see what would happen, applied it to the 212 Davis Drive unit mix. So you'll see here this is the average for Consult with an extrapolated 1 plus den, because they didn't include 1 plus dens. So instead of 1 per 1 across the board, they do 0.75 for a 1 bedroom, 0.81 for a 1 plus den, and 0.88 if you multiply for a 2 bedroom. If you multiply that by our unit breakdown, that adds up to 225. For resident parking, that would total to 183 spots. And so if you actually if you do the math on the visitor, if you add the visitor at 0.1, which would be an additional 23 spots, we'd be up to 206. And if you add 0.15, which is their max, you'd be at 217, which is exactly what we're proposing. So this isn't how we came to our number originally, but this is something we looked at after the fact, just to check the rationale behind the numbers. Finally, the most important thing I think I'd like to express to council today is that this is our problem. Ultimately, we have to lease this building one way or another. If we make a big mistake on not providing enough parking, we won't be able to lease the units. As such, we've partnered with a partner, Greenwind, who manages over 25,000 apartment buildings, not units, not buildings, 25,000 units throughout Ontario. And they definitely have a lot of their properties in Toronto, but they also have properties in Brantford, Cambridge, Kitchener, other smaller centers similar to Newmarket. They are fully supportive of the proposed parking ratio, and our combined business plan requires high occupancy, and they are very confident in this number. We're confident in this number. However, if we do underbuild and we don't provide enough parking, we wanted to look at what are the risks to the town. And in this case, I think one of the things about this location is there are no public parking lots that are going to be filled up by our residents in the area. So it's not like it's a downtown Main Street situation where if they don't park in our lot, they're going to be finding their ways onto public parking lots. That won't be happening here. As well, there's no real convenient streets to even park on. So really, we have to solve this problem. And we have a contingency plan. As per the zoning bylaw, there is a provision that allows for off-site parking agreements. We haven't done that. We've purposely not gone down that road because we don't think it's necessary at this point. But we always have that in our back pocket if we have to. We don't want to be required to do so. And finally, one of the key things that we have been required to do, but we also want to do, is provide transportation demand management planning for this site. So obviously we have the Viva right outside our door. We provided for the required parking both indoor and outdoor for bicycles. We've been asked to not only provide one sidewalk from our front door, but two. We haven't completely agreed to the second sidewalk, but there will likely be two sidewalks to allow our residents to be able to access the pedestrian connectivity on Davis Drive. We have provided the requisite number of car share spaces or HOV spaces, and we've also unbundled parking so that residents aren't required to take parking with their units. It's not part of the rent. They actually have to pay extra. And the way to encourage people not to use a car is to make it less convenient for them to use a car. And one of the ways is to charge them for it. Another way is to not provide as much parking. So we also plan to have a TDM coordinator to help educate our residents on how to get Presto cards and have Viva passes. And we've also been in touch with, ironically, the Smart Commute people, Pat Lissink, who works down at the Chamber of Commerce. And although they typically work with businesses as opposed to residential buildings, they are talking about in the future, if Metrolink gives them the mandate to work with buildings. The bottom part here is a fresh new tool that just came out last week, or a couple weeks ago, which allows you to coordinate rides with other people in your area to be able to share rides to go from Newmarket to Toronto or any other workplace. So we would be very supportive of that. So as a final slide, our goal is to provide the right amount of parking for this building. We don't want to provide too much parking. We don't want to not have enough as well. But we also don't want to end up with a number of vacant spaces. One of the things I got out of our conversation with the Housing York people is they have a lot of properties that have a lot of vacant parking. One of the reasons is because of the people who live there. You have your typical renter, then you have your renter who's affordable, and then you have your renter who is a senior. And the numbers just go down from there. The numbers I provided all deal with simply rental statistics.
Okay, thank you. So we're about the equivalent of a presentation, which is probably more appropriate for our consideration. I have some questions. Councillor Sponga?
Yes, thank you, Dan, for the presentation, and you raised some really good points. I have a question first on the first item, and it's on the stair wall. There is an unresolved issue that will have an AHL holding on it, and it has to do with the open ditch to the front and the grading issue. And we're all aware of the fact that because of the initial issues that you faced with the Conservation Authority with the open ditch, the building had to be shifted to the south. Seeing that there is a potential resolution on the horizon to that issue, would there be an opportunity to push the building north further, and would the impact of that wall on the south end, and it's pretty much one of the few issues that I have heard of concern, would there be an opportunity to mitigate that issue by resolving the issues to the front and dealing with the grading issues of that property as a result of past dumping? First question on that item.
Go ahead, Dan,
So,
please.
I never know what to say, but through you, Mayor, to Councillor Sponga. Is that correct?
Whatever you want to call
Okay,
it.
that's
All right.
normal protocol.
I'm learning. So I believe, Councillor Sponga, that you're referring to moving the building forward, and this is a new version of the site plan where we have in fact done that.
Okay.
So we've already taken into account that there was a second line here that's now come off because we have now been told that it's not a fishery at the front. So as a result, we were able to move the building in, and this is now a 10-meter setback as opposed to, I think it was originally 17 to that line. Now it's 10 from there to the property line. So we have moved it forward. In terms of mitigating, are you?
So I'm sorry, then let me be clearer. Will you be moving the accessory parking structure with the building?
The accessory parking was moved forward. Well, it was. I believe it was also moved forward, but that was mainly to accommodate the requested setback of 3 meters at the back. So that was the shift was mainly to accommodate the engineering's requested setback. I believe when you refer to the wall, do you mean the back wall of this parking right here?
Both the back wall and the stair wall at the other end. Right, where's the stairs?
The stairs are up here.
Right there.
In this corner.
So by pushing the whole parking over, now you've got more room for grading in the back, so to meet those grades with the potential minor collector in the future, and also the impact of the height, because while you're moving them back, whether you like it or not, the angular perspectives are different, right?
Yeah, I think the main way we have mitigated the impact of that wall is by substantial landscaping through this landscape buffer that we have provided, 3-meter landscape buffer. So that's probably the best way we'd be able to answer the question at this point. The holding provision is still there because we don't have the grade of this road yet, so we don't actually, I can't honestly answer that question until such time that we are aware of what the grade will be. Because if the grade's higher, then it will be mitigated by itself. If the grade's lower, which we don't have any control over at this stage, then it may be higher. In any event, we'll provide the landscaping to block out the view of the wall.
Okay, so you'll be able to touch more specifically on those issues at the site plan?
Yes.
Review? Okay, great. On the second item, the parking item, a couple of questions for clarification. One is, are you saying that 16 then is the number of parking spots, resident parking spots that you're in deficit of?
No.
Because the number I saw on that slide was 225, and then I believe you said that when you actually did your calculations, you're at 206, and then you mentioned a number of 217.
I don't have the full site plan in front of me. I believe that if you multiply
You had a slide, second last.
So what I would say is, let me just go back.
There.
That one? Which slide are you talking about?
I think it was that one. Then you touched on the fact that that number 183 actually became 206.
Oh, yes. Okay, so the zoning bylaw, if you multiply 1.1 times 225, I believe the number is 247 is the
Right.
total that, and we are actually providing 217, so we're deficient 30 spots.
That's what I was looking for.
Maybe
Okay.
31, I can't remember how the rounding
All right,
works.
so let's say 30 spot. Those are resident only, or are they a combination of resident and visitors?
That's total.
total.
That's total.
Okay.
That's included.
So so basically if everybody in the building was to require a parking spot or enter an agreement to lease a parking spot, then you would have a deficit of
30.
30, right?
30.
And those would be for your visitor parking.
Yeah, I mean, I think the requirement is one to one
Right.
for the actual residents, so that'd be 225, and the balance up to 247
It's for the
is
visitors.
for the visitors.
Okay. Between now, I'm not as concerned about the resident aspect, because at the end of the day, the residents, as you said, there's a business case behind it. They will make that decision whether to enter into a lease agreement or not, whether they need that parking or not. My biggest concern becomes with the visitors. Would there be an opportunity between now and site plan review for you to have a discussion? Because I realize, and I agree with you, that that site is pretty much landlocked, and it's not like somebody's going to park on Calgane and then walk all around to get to this development, or park on Wilstead and try to navigate through that to get there. But it is the impact the only impact would really be to the church. Would there be an opportunity between now and site plan review where you could have a discussion with the church in this regard, and we could get an indication whether they have a concern or not?
I think the answer is clearly yes. We've actually had discussions with the church on this topic. Again, we don't want to be compelled by a zoning bylaw to have an agreement with them, but they are, we have a very good relationship with them, and certainly we could talk to them between now and site plan to get clarity.
Excellent.
We just don't want to be in a position where we're required to have an agreement with them.
Okay, thank you. That's the only two
Thank you.
questions I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor DiMuccio?
Thanks for your presentation. Really compelling arguments. You're a good speaker. But I guess what I'm always concerned about, so what you're requesting is staff, although we're adamant in your own words about the ratios that they had recommended, you're saying, and you based it on a few studies, that wasn't required. But I guess what I'm trying to find out is I'm interested in why staff was quite adamant about the recommendation. Obviously you wouldn't be able to answer that, but I'd like to hear from staff, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Nethery would be the appropriate person? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Commissioner.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor, yes, we did review this application quite thoroughly, and staff were very cognizant of the recent work that was undertaken as part of the secondary plan and the background transportation studies that accompanied that. And as you're familiar with, there's a number of recommendations that pertain to parking. And although the prevailing parking standards would have been 1.25 per unit for apartment buildings, the transportation study as part of the secondary plan recommended a minimum and maximum. And for apartment units, that minimum and maximum ranged from 1.1 per unit to 1.15 per unit. So, and that took into account the desire to create a corridor in the secondary plan that was took full advantage of the emerging transit nature that's coming forward and the intensification that's expected, as well as trying to achieve a more multimodal travel demand system in Newmarket, in particular in the secondary plan areas, not as reliant only on auto ownership for people to get around. So, you know, staff felt that coming down to the 1.1 per unit was still in compliance with the direction coming from the studies and in keeping with the minimum rate of parking. Now, there are some additional pieces of information that the applicant and his consultant has brought forward, which seem to suggest that some other areas may experience even lower resident demand. However, from a purely professional advice to council, staff feel that the 1.1 was as low as staff could feel comfortable with and still respect the community, so that the potential for overflow parking onto residential streets in the area or adjoining properties was minimized.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Commissioner, you do have a background in transportation, is that correct?
I do, Councillor.
Okay. Now, I'm concerned. So have you read the secondary plan? Have you read about the intensification, the proposals, and how, because what
Perhaps.
the Commissioner has said is resonating with me, and I'm just wondering if you had looked at that in the town of Newmarket, because I know that you cited other studies and, you know, Vaughan, but I'm just wondering how familiar you are with the secondary plan.
This is a question for Mr. Berholtz?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Berholtz?
So during the secondary plan process, I certainly reviewed the relevant sections that and indeed came to provide deputation on certain issues. The focus, and I completely understand and respect the work that was done going into secondary plan, and we're not arguing it. It was just a matter of I believe there's a possibility that some of the factors associated with this development, the fact that it's rental versus condo, the fact that there's going to be a significant, 25% is going to be rent geared to income, and also there's going to be we expect a significant amount of seniors. I don't know if the secondary plan is detailed enough to have dove into those particular categories and to offset the lower end of the spectrum to accommodate those specifics of this particular development. So I can't say I've reviewed the secondary plan completely, but I certainly have reviewed parts of it. And I think ultimately this secondary plan also just came into effect recently, so I can understand why staff wouldn't want to say something and recommend something completely contrary to the secondary plan so soon after it was passed by council, which is why, you know, we're here on this last issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hempin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have some concerns on the reduction in parking also. I'm not sure that the full number that you've presented that is 183, including visitor parking?
No, it's 217, which actually, I don't know if it's actually in this presentation anywhere. But the final slide was that we're asking to go from 0.1 down to 0.86 and maintain the same visitor spots as requested by the bylaw. So it's 217 is the total.
Okay, thank you. It's a little bit confusing because on our report we have a 0.98,
221, yeah.
0.98, and then all of a sudden it's gone to 4.86. so it's a reduction again.
Yeah.
Our current standard is, would require about 281, but after hearing the 1.1 as being a minimum that the town would request, I do have some concerns regarding parking. You mentioned that there would be a cost for parking and that your corporation would be charging for that parking. Any idea of what you'd be charging for the spaces?
We would most likely match the existing parking along Calgane, and I believe the number that I've heard is somewhere in the neighborhood of $35 or $40. Depends on if it's indoor or outdoor, so we haven't set that price, but if you look at the outdoor parking charges along in the other rental buildings, we'd probably be very similar to that.
Okay, now, part of the application would include 25% subsidized affordable housing. I guess those homes would not be charged the $35 or $40 for the parking then. Would that be correct in assuming that?
To be honest, we haven't had that discussion, but that wasn't part of our initial plan. What we do know is that, and I could let Kim comment on it, is those types of owners typically don't have the same level of ownership of cars, based on the experience of Housing York. However, so I don't have a better answer than that.
Right. Yeah, I do have some concerns on the reduction of parking. I own a very small apartment building on Davis Drive, and you know, most of the people do have cars. Even the people who are on social assistance, they do have vehicles. So, if you could consider that, thank you.
Thank you. Regional Councillor?
Thanks very much. A couple of quick I'll get to the parking, Dana, but I just want to start with the parking structure. And I think does that have to be addressed today from staff in a motion or not, the height of the parking structure that you referred to? Or is that just something that staff needs to look at? I wasn't clear on that.
Mr. Nehammer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to seek the advice of Mr. Nethery on that.
Mr. Nethery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The bylaw currently is reflecting the normal and usual requirement in the parent bylaw, which is the 4.6 you've heard mention of. So it will be necessary for us to address it in some manner to the extent that whatever relief is being requested needs to be identified first, and then we can consider whether or not it's appropriate to grant that number.
You mean staff will go off because you don't need council to deal with this today?
Well, council is not passing a bylaw today, but they're looking at a bylaw that you'll hopefully be able to pass next week.
Right.
And so that is a number that's in that bylaw. So if it's not going to be the standard 4.6, we need to find out what the right number is. And part of the difficulty has been, as I understand it, is that the engineering design is still evolving a bit on this. So I think I heard Dan say a couple of different numbers. I think I had heard 5.18 or something like that in terms of the height.
And 6.6 after that.
Basically what we talked about, sorry, through Mary.
Go ahead.
This morning I had a conversation with Marion, and the discussion was what would be, the worst case scenario if Burnside came in at X, at the grade for the road, and the worst case scenario could be going down to 0. So that would be 2 meters. So we're basically saying the worst case scenario could be 4.6 plus an additional 2 meters. But right now we believe it to be 5.18, so it would only, we could go to 5.18, but we just don't have to come back and get a minor variance to go above that if Burnside ends up asking us to go down further.
Gotcha. So my simple question to you, Mr. Nethery, is that something staff's going to work on and come back to the council, or do you need some emotional direction from council today?
Mr. Mayor, through you, we will need to put a number in there, and we'd appreciate your advice if you've got some advice for us on that. It's difficult for us to be unequivocal, given that we haven't seen that final engineering design, and it's not just Dan hasn't been doing his job, it's that there's some external examination by R.J. Burnside, for example, to set the center line of the proposed road. So some of that information is still a little bit in flux. And so that will presumably be the number that will ultimately be defined. So your choice then is to, I guess, look at the worst case scenario and see if an increase of an additional 2 meters is appropriate for you. Given that there is already some concern in terms of that southerly interface.
And I hate to say it, but we're dealing with so much holding provisions now. Could this be dealt with? I guess I hate to allow the maximum when it may not be needed in the end.
Yeah.
Especially because then we lose frankly, leverage if it's something we want less of and it can be achieved.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess that is a good point, and I guess if it turns out that you set the maximum but you don't need it, then, I mean, Dan doesn't want to buy any more concrete than he has to. So he probably won't want to build it at that additional 2 meters in height. But the Commissioner and I were having a conversation on this matter earlier today. Whatever you put in that bylaw is what needs to be there. So even with the use of an H, you can't sort of have an either or. So, I mean, in this case, you know, even thinking about the parking discussion, if it's not 1.1, it's 0.96 or whatever the number is, it's got to be one or the other. You can't say...
Even with the use of a holding provision?
That's right. I mean, all the holding provision does is release the H, and then that's the bylaw that's in place. So it's important to get it right at this point. And that's why we've been trying to sweat some of these details with Dan. You know, in terms of that height, we don't know quite yet because the engineering design isn't quite as mature as it could or should be. It will be there, but in the absence of knowing that, and given that we've only got one council meeting left, your choice is simply to grant the fullest extent and hope that you don't need to rely on that actual number.
Could I just clarify? So it could be up to that height. It doesn't necessarily have to be that height.
Correct.
Okay.
So just while you were on this thread, because I'm going to move to, but I've got questions for you as well, Dana, but on the parking, so you're saying we can't put in a holding provision that put in place a range of 0.96 to 1.1 or point whatever to 1.1. We have to pick a number.
You do.
But if we pick a number and the holding's lifted, that's the number. So we have no ability to bring it. If we picked the lowest number, then there's no way for us. I mean, I guess we lose our. It's either all or nothing then.
That's right. So Mr. Mayor, you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Right.
So if you've given it that lower permission that's being sought, then that's what's established.
But if we give the lower permission, staff won't lift it unless they feel that it's been fully and highly justified.
Yeah. So then that creates a bit of a kind of an
It's
untenable
all or nothing,
situation because you've got a bylaw that's approved, but you can't lift the H. The other alternative, just with your line of thinking, was use the other number. And if he can't meet it, then he's got the availability of a variance to go through and to try to justify it with. I think what I'm hearing is there's some recent information that's come forward around some of the details associated with some of the next door buildings. Some of the discussion that probably has some merit. I'm not a traffic engineer, so I can't comment on it, but around the tenure of the buildings and the occupancy and the car ownership, which all might have some impact on that if it were fully examined. I don't know that we've had all of that information that we've been able to do that empirical analysis of, and that could be an option for you as well.
Okay, thank you. Then through you, Mr. Mayor, to you, Daniel. I have to admit, and I've been following this one pretty closely, I'm a little confused too. I believed I'd had conversations with you very recently that the number you were seeking was 0.96.
That's correct.
This report says 0.98, and your slide says 0.86.
Oh, okay, so let me clarify all three of those things. 0.86 is without visitor parking. So it's 0.1 plus 0.86 equals 0.96.
So still 0.96 is
still
the magic. Okay.
And the reason it went down, the reason it went down from 0.98 to 0.96 is a very simple reason, is that we used to have parking right here. If you look at on your screens, there were 4 spots, 1, 2, 3, 4, were accessed from this ramp, and engineering staff asked us to lessen the grade of this ramp, so it was a more gradual grade that came up. Instead of 11%, now it's 8%, and because of the grade, we lost these 4 spots. So it went down from 221 to 217.
Okay.
Now.
Thank you. Okay, I think the rest of my comments I'll save for the report. This is just questions for yourself. I'll leave it for now. But is anybody clarified for us, or can someone clarify that we are talking about at 0.96? Are we talking about 217 cars, and at 1.1 are we talking about 247 with a delta of 30? It'd be nice to know that that is correct. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Twinney, questions of clarification?
Yeah, thank you. Can you go back to the slide that had the other municipalities and showed all the different examples of the different park demand, peak demand numbers? Those numbers, when you say peak demand, are those what those particular buildings were? But like, do we have a variance in the bylaw for those, or are those exactly what is actually parking there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Twinney. Those were the actual numbers of the demand when it was measured.
Okay,
So that's how much of the parking is actually being used
okay,
during the surveyed periods.
all right. And so through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe to staff, have we overridden our bylaw exemption prior for buildings to reduce the number of parking spots? Do we have any cases of those? And we have done this in the past?
Mr. Nethery?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we have. It's typically done with the benefit of a parking justification report that we've seen and that has been accepted by engineering.
Right.
So I guess that's the difference on this one. At the, perhaps the order of magnitude is a bit different than what we've seen in before. We've done it for residential stuff as well as some of the commercial things as well.
Okay, and so, just so I have this correct, are you saying from what your comments were just now to Regional Councillor Taylor that we haven't examined perhaps everything now this new information's come forward and we're going to do more of a parking?
Mr. Mayor, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask. Peter might be able to help more in that regard, but I think we have heard some more information today than what we might have had access to before.
Mr. Neumann?
Might help if they
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Twinney, some of this information is new, some of it is not. We have heard mention that there's some, in particular, the survey information that's from Toronto or further south, where the context is quite different with respect to transit and built form. Some of the information on that table I'm not sure I've seen before with respect to adjacent buildings, but I think suffice to say it will still be difficult for staff to vary the advice given through the transportation study of the secondary plan, given that it's quite recent and it does recommend a minimum standard to contemplate when the applications come forward in the secondary plan area. So this might be sort of early days yet, but that's the best information that staff have to go on, notwithstanding some of the specific surveys that might be provided by the applicant.
I would be interested in knowing what our parking ratios are for some of our other buildings that are similar, perhaps the ones on Davis Drive and no, these are what is actually there, but what we have actually, put in place, what is actually the parking spots? Are they 1.1? Are they 1.25? What is the actual ratio that we have for some of our locations now and how they compare to the peak demand numbers that are showing on here?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so, good question. I don't have the answer to that.
I think there's still, I guess for me, there's still a few, things that we need to examine first before we can make a determination.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Sponga?
Yeah, questions for Mr. Barinholtz. One is, Dan, we're dealing really both on an issue with the height, with the parking garage, and with the parking numbers, with two minor variances issues. Could I assume I know the answer, but I'd rather not. Could you tell me why you wouldn't want to pursue this as two minor variances separately and move forward with the bylaw now?
In terms of the accessory building height,
Mm-hmm.
I'd prefer to avoid going through the minor variance process simply because we know our design already, and staff hasn't expressed any concerns with it. The only reason it came up is because no one had, our staff, my team in terms of our consultants, nor the planning staff, nor the engineering staff, nobody had picked it up during the process, literally until we were at the counter submitting our site plan review. So we didn't realize it was even an issue, and it really isn't an issue. I don't think, and I don't think staff would have a problem with it. You can ask Mr. Netherly about that. That being said, I'd prefer to avoid a whole separate process over something that's not a real issue.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking the question is because, as we heard from our commissioner, both Mr. Nethery, is that at this point we really are missing some information from the engineering evaluations that are being made. So trying to pick a number without having that basic information, to me, it's a bit difficult. Having said that, though, the same issue in terms of the minor variance, if I understand, is with the parking. And could you tell me that reason would be?
I don't know I'm not a planner, so I don't know the exact criteria for minor variance and how it would relate to a reduction from the 247 to the 217. I don't know if the Committee of Adjustment would consider that minor in nature, or if we'd have to go to the OMB to deal with that kind of issue, and I'd certainly rather avoid that. We don't, this is a transitional time for Newmarket, and this is particularly a transitional time for Davis Drive. If you looked at, Councillor Twinney's comment about what was the standard in place when they built, effectively, I think the question was, the other buildings along Davis Drive, what would be the standard for spots there? Well, those buildings were built 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 30 years ago. So the standards were a lot higher. There was certainly no Viva. People probably had fewer cars at the time, but they had more cars. People only drove. There probably wasn't very good bus service on Davis Drive. So they were built at a totally different time. Now we have the benefit of, the fact that the Viva line's there. There's going to be much less use of cars. So we feel very strongly that there's all the information is here. We know what we can build. We have done the numbers. This is a feasible development as is. To add another parking deck to allow for more parking, to me, doesn't make any sense, particularly because it'll sit vacant. In our experience, based on Cole Engineering expertise, based on the experience of Housing York, based on the experience in Markham with some of the other buildings that have these RGI units and a lot of seniors, why would we build it? And why would we go through another process to try to convince another group of people that it's the right thing to do? We'd rather get it over with right here.
Having said that, and my final comment, Mr. Mayor, and question, as we heard also from a commissioner and the director of planning, I think that some of the information around the parking is relatively new. I'm not sure to what extent our staff has had a chance to sift through that information and make the accurate assessments to include that information within the recommendation that are in front of us. And I just want to say that this is a very cooperative environment, because you're proposing a product that we definitely need. And I think that we've shown that willingness to work with you from my perspective, to try to get people out of basements and into the appropriate rental units that they need. Having said that, and that you want to move quickly, and we would like to see this sort of project move forward as well. Having said that, and I know your timelines are very short, would there be an opportunity to defer this, just this item, specifically the two items of the parking and the height, so that between now and the council meeting of next week, so that you have an ability to vet with staff, look at these, what you call minor issues in terms of the height from 5 meters 18 to whatever, and what comes down to a difference in parking philosophies with the new information. Is that something that could work, and then we could get a better understanding between now and council of that information that's in front of us, and get the benefit of the feedback from staff? Could that work for you?
Go ahead.
I don't.
I mean, there's a week's worth of time there, and I guess the question is, you're proposing that we defer those two key items and bring that to, have staff bring that to council. Well, council gets to deal with it in any event.
Yeah.
So if it helps, I'll be making a motion to that nature once we actually get to the report, but we're still at.
Yep, we're still
I wasn't making a motion, I'm just asking.
No.
Yeah, I'm just asking how this would impact, or whether there's something you can work with.
There's no doubt that there will be an effort to work collaboratively between now and what comes forward. But let's deal with the questions of clarification now, and then we can bring those suggestions forward when we actually deal with the report
So that was the
itself.
question, too.
Yep. And go
I mean,
ahead.
our goal is to, in this council cycle, ideally have a zoning bylaw approved so we can move on with the site plan approval process. There's a number of holding provisions, a lot of detail to be worked through. The only items that we're bringing forward today are the ones that we know need to be part of the zoning bylaw, and we would like to proceed prior to the break for the election, and our goal is to have this under construction as soon as possible. So that's so the answer is if there is a process over the next 7 days to achieve something, and there's an opening for staff to consider what we're saying, we'd certainly be willing to work with them. We just don't want to lose this process. We just don't want to lose the.
That's what I wanted to do.
Thank you. Regional Councillor.
So along the lines, through to staff, if there was holding provisions put in around one or both of these items, I'll just wait for a minute. Okay, so probably through to you, Mr. Nohammer. If there is a holding provision put in place in relation to one or both of these items with a specific number, not a range, then what would be the process if at a certain point staff didn't feel the applicant was or could ever satisfy them. What's the process at that point, and how do we get to that point?
Mr. Noheimer?
So in response to your question, Councillor, I think the process would be that there would be an H on whatever standard is adopted, and then it would be up to the applicant to try to lift that H through satisfying staff that that's an appropriate number. So I guess if it comes to a point where staff are not satisfied that the H could be lifted, the option then would be to submit to the Committee of Adjustment for a variance to change the standard.
Is there a way for the applicant or for council to provide direction that question could come back to council?
Well, I guess that would be amending the zoning bylaw again.
Right.
So it would actually be another zoning bylaw amendment.
Which would have to go through public process, et cetera? Or?
Yeah. Mr. Nethery, do you have anything further to add?
Mr. Nethery, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the commissioners touched on the key points. Another venue could be, for example, if it turned out that it was just impossible to lift the H because of whatever the requirement was, and there was no absolute way that the staff could be satisfied, then it would, in all likelihood, need to come back to council for reconsideration, I suppose, in terms of the appropriateness of the H or the appropriateness of the number. But I'd need to do a little bit of checking to see whether or not that would give rise to the need to go back into a public notice requirement. There is, as you know, public notice required for a variance, although it's not as large a circulation and so on. But if it turned out that it just wasn't, I've never run into it, by the way, but it's just not possible to lift an H, then I think council would probably have to re-adjudicate that and see whether or not it wanted to give a different standard or some other remedy. And of course that means that pardon me, there is no opportunity to get a building permit or anything in the interim. So it's obviously key that everyone moves forward to try to resolve the issue.
Okay. I'll when we go to the report, I'll have a motion with regards to this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor DiMuccio.
Thank you. But correct me if I'm wrong, though, but I'm just reading the agenda, and I see some recommendations from staff. So I'm not understanding what Councillor Sponga or Taylor are saying in terms of let's go back and work with staff. I'd like to know, does staff have any, well, obviously we're always willing, staff's always willing to work with the developer, and that's what they do. But I also have a set of recommendations here for adoption today, if that's not correct. Am I correct, through you, Mr. Mayor?
We can come back to that, Councillor. What I'd like to do is just finish questions of clarification with the deputy, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Well, it is a question of clarification to staff, Mr. Mayor. Are these is staff willing to go back at the recommendations that they have here and change them? Because it's really, you're asking council to change this. So you're asking council to change the staff's recommendations. And so I want to know, is staff, what their professional opinion is, are they willing to look at your recommendation, and are you going to be changing anything?
I think that this would probably be part of the discussion of the report itself.
Well, can I get an answer, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Mr. Noel.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor. The set of recommendations before committee today is the best professional advice that staff have at the current time with the information that we've been provided. Now, I'm not going to presuppose that, if staff had other information that's relevant to alter that recommendation, that could very well be the case. But today, as of today, this is the best advice that we would like to give committee.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Motion to receive, Regional Councillor, seconded by Councillor Sponga. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Be appropriate now to bring forward item number 17 and also item number 36. So members of council will see that item number 17 is a report with recommendations that have subsequently been modified under item number 36, I believe. Yeah. So it might be appropriate to receive item number 17 with the view that we're going to deal with the same issue and the same recommendations, somewhat modified under item number 36. Councillor Sponga? Seconder? Councillor Demuccio. And again, that's with the intent of dealing with the same issue with different recommendations under item number 36. All those in favor? That is carried. Can I have a motion with respect to the recommendations? Regional Councillor?
Thanks. I'm just going to give a little, if you'll indulge me, a short preamble to the recommendation. But I do, the one thing I want to say is a couple things. I think our secondary plan and the accompanying work that went with it is relatively new. I have to say, I find it odd that we've got a range, parking range for the corridor of 1.1 to 1.15. I'm sure even some staff must have looked at that and said, that's a, I mean, that's, I'm not sure you can call that a range, but regardless, that's the parameters we're working, are being guided by at this moment. The other thing I want to say is that I think there was some compelling, you really want the recommendation first. Okay, I'll give you the recommendation first. And the parking, that parking requirements for 212 Davis Drive be recognized as a holding provision within the bylaw, and that staff work with the applicant to establish the parking ratio of 0.96, and that the applicant provide staff with a full jurisdiction a full justification report for a reduction below the 1.1 that was recommended, and that the applicant offer options to address parking demands such as but not limited to parking agreements and shared parking. I want to point out that there's another motion that goes with it because it may speak to the first one, and that is that Newmarket Council requests the Regional Municipality of York explore 212 Davis Drive as part of this pilot project, providing transit passes for each unit to encourage transit use by new residents, and that York Region explore this policy direction for all new intensification projects on the Vivid Rapidway corridors.
Okay, now that's in addition to the recommendations that are contained in the report?
I would have to look at them to see if it alters any of them, so I can't say off the top of my head.
What's the exception to that?
I know staff can help us with that.
Mr. Nethery?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, certainly the section of the draft bylaw that deals with the parking numbers would need to be addressed. So to reflect the 0.96 versus the 1.1.
Okay.
So we could the first recommendation say council support zoning bylaw amendment as amended in accordance with, or something like that, and then make these amendments? Is that the way to go?
Or subject to the foregoing? Okay. So the intent then is to deal with the report, to deal with the recommendations, subject to what's being proposed in those parking numbers. Is that correct? I just want to be clear.
Yes, subject to the two additional motions.
Okay.
I have a question of clarification. In regards to the transit passes, you're suggesting any new development. Can you explain and give me a little
I'd
more
love
detail?
to, but I'm not allowed to speak to it yet.
Yep. I'll get a seconder to the motion. Councillor
would.
Sponga, okay. Then we'll let regional councillor speak to it as the mover, and then the seconder, and then we can come into those details.
Right.
Now, just to clarify, the last portion, does that specifically need to relate to item number 36, or can that be dealt with separately?
I'd like it in the recommendations.
Yeah, what was the last one? Was that the regional
Yes.
pilot project?
Yes.
Okay. So you'd like that to be part of the item number 36? Okay. All right. So we can deal with it. We can
Okay.
vote on each separately.
So I'll speak to them briefly now. I think a couple of things I want to say is, and I go back to my first point, I think our range of 1.1 to 1.15 is a little tight for recognizing various circumstances that can arise with in relation to parking demand, transportation demand management, et cetera, along a higher order transit corridor. Having said that, I also think that we've seen some compelling evidence today in front of us about parking demand levels. Obviously, that needs to be peer reviewed, and staff need to examine it closely. But it does sort of, and I hadn't seen much of this until today, particularly the examples that are very close to home. You know, I would want to hear from staff more on that, but it does seem to suggest that there are that the range maybe is too tight, and that this could consider special circumstances. We have, as was pointed by staff, amended or provided exceptions in the past, and as pointed out, this is staff's recommendation at this time, but they also said that they are always open to new information, and if you take more time, perhaps more information alters or does not alter that position, but it's always could be looked at. And certainly in terms of our reaction to staff recommendations, I think it's fair to say that every member of this council has voted against staff recommendations at some time or another, or voted for a different recommendation, not necessarily against a different recommendation than staff recommendation. And I think every member of this council has supported asking staff to just look a little longer and a little harder at the information to see what any new information might speak to. So I think we've got some compelling data here and some compelling argument. So I would like us to try to do this. I think the other reason, and I think it's been a while since we've spoken to it, but it goes without saying that this is a pilot project of the region of the town of Newmarket. There's been a great deal of recognition recently, both in the media and around these council tables and other council tables, that there is a significant shortage of rental housing, and we are working with someone in a pilot project environment, trying to see a project which is difficult to make a reality, become a reality, and so going an extra distance. And that doesn't mean we waive our concerns about parking, as has been, and some other councillors have spoken to their concerns about the parking. I share it. But I do think, because of the circumstance of this being a rental building, the first significant rental building in the region in 20 years, I think it behooves us to take that extra look. And I think the motion I'm suggesting puts it into a holding provision at the 0.96, but does require the proponent to bring back a lot of information and work with staff to try to have a conversation to see if there is a justification that does exist, not to convince staff to think otherwise, but to see if a justification does exist. And and I'll be honest, it's my true hope that one does exist, and certainly some of this data suggests it's possible. The second motion, I have been having conversations with the commissioner at the region about this. This is something I've been thinking about and looking into for a little while. And I really think that there's an opportunity here for York Region to play a leadership role in moving not only a project like this when it comes to rental, but perhaps, and staff at the region have to look into this more fully, but perhaps to move other intensification projects in the region to support them and have them support the new Viva Transit Rapidways along the corridors. If you think about it, providing somebody with a month or a 3-month transit pass who lives in a new intensified building on the Viva Rapid corridors costs the region close to nothing. The system is there, the infrastructure is there. Perhaps there's a little lost revenue, a little if some of those people were about to buy a pass anyway. But what it does is takes every new person in an intensified setting that's moving into that new regional corridor along the investment we put in rapid transit. It gives them the free opportunity and the encouragement to give it a try for a very set period of time. If 10% of them, 5% of them take that up, it helps us reach our goals of ridership, but it also creates more ongoing revenue for transit through people buying passes on an ongoing basis year after year. So that's yet to be examined, but I have to tell you that the commissioner was very receptive to the idea and thought there was merit in exploring it and thought it could be explored relatively quickly. So those are my comments. Again, I want to just stress that it's a holding provision. Unlike the other holding provisions, it would require that justification did exist and that it could be demonstrated by the proponent. And I do believe that, I'm sorry, and I should probably add a third recommendation, but that we also provide a holding recommendation on the parking structure wall of 6.6 to allow for that as a reality, but to also not just approve it so that it can be held with staff being convinced that that is the only option possible. And obviously if lower options are possible, it's the best interest of the town and the proponent, but it would obviously come in below that.
Councillor Sponga is the seconder. Would you see that as a friendly amendment? Yes. Okay, thank you. So
Those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Sponga is the seconder.
Thank you. I think, again, that I had the opportunity this weekend to speak with a gentleman that lives in a boarding house where up to 14 other individuals share bedrooms and common spaces, and this gentleman has 2 young daughters, and again, he stressed the need for our residents to have access to safe rental housing options. And so I commend this council and I commend the region for embarking in this pilot project, because I think it's not only it's a first in 20 years in the region, but it also recognizes the fact that we need to address this very important issue in that segment of our population in our community, which is a very large segment. Having said that, as always, I appreciate the opportunity I appreciate having new information brought forward. But I also like to have the opportunity of having our staff review that information, the accuracy, and how it impacts the discussion of this council. And that's why I suggested earlier that if there was a way for us to move forward with the report and at the same time hold those two items until we had some further information. So I'm okay with that range in terms of trying to stay below the 6.16, is it? Sorry? 6.6. And I like the direction that this motion gives in terms of our staff reviewing the information here and at the same time the proponent looking at alternative arrangements satisfying the deficit, Mr. Mayor. So I think it's definitely a step in the right direction, just as the whole project has been to this date.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hempin?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that I think this is a wonderful project, and it really is necessary for our community. We are really in a deficit for rental housing. That being said, we just undertook a secondary plan. It's taken a number of years. We've gone through many iterations of the secondary plan, laying out how our town should look. Our transportation study was just completed as well. And in that study, it recommended for 1.1 spaces per unit, and that's in the report in front of us. So it is concerning to see a request for reduction. I see the need for the building. I can appreciate that. I want to work with the proponent and the developer to accomplish our mutual goals. I have a concern when I hear that we're going to ask for a reduction in parking and our solution is going to be to charge for parking. When we charge for parking and the building has a component that's 25% subsidized housing and people who are renting, it concerns me that we're redeveloping our corridor. And when we're redeveloping our corridor and we don't have enough parking spaces, people are people, and people will look for parking spaces. We're going to have new commercial. We have business existing on the street already. We have streets in the area, and those people will be looking for parking spaces where they don't have to pay. If they're told they don't have a parking spot and they have a car, they're going to look for that space. That's going to affect the business owners. That's going to affect other buildings. That's going to affect neighboring properties. So I'm hoping that we can see some resolution to this. I appreciate the motion for putting a hold on this, but when we put a hold on something and we don't set clear direction immediately, putting that hold on gives the opportunity for the developer to take that out of our hands and say, look, we can't do this. We're not going to do it. And as we've heard, they can go to the Committee of Adjustment and bypass the recommendations in this report and our hold. So that concerns me. So I see the need for it. I think it's a wonderful thing, and I'm hoping that the developer will work and try to accomplish getting as close to that 1.1 number, not to affect and set a precedence that will affect our whole secondary plan and the development along Davis Drive. And those are my comments.
Thank you. Councillor DiMuccio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that I think it's fair to say that all members of council here see the need for rental units in Newmarket. I think we all agree there's a shortage, but I would also say that there's a shortage of parking spots. I see it all the time. I know that for many, many years, the town of Newmarket, York Region, has pumped a lot of money into trying to get people to use public transit, and we haven't really seen that. I personally haven't seen that at all. I've seen the opposite. I see people that can't afford homes and they rent, and you know, they might do better in life, and they might get better in their finances, and they buy cars. That's what I see, and I'm really concerned. I understand your position, but you know, I would not support the motion that Regional Councillor Taylor put forward, and that's simply because we are not engineers, we're not experts. We are just council members. We hire people at the staff to do this work. They're professionals. They have experience. They know what they're doing. I really rely on their advice. Sometimes I might not agree with it, and that's fair, but I do rely on it, especially when it comes to something as specific as engineering and planning. So I don't see a need, you know, it's good for us to hope, and I think it's a great proposal to, you know, to offer these kinds of incentives, but I would never sit here and say that I can predict the future, and I'm going to say that You know, those people that buy those units are not going to have cars, and if they do, maybe we can encourage them to do, you know, to ride the public transit. I don't see that I could predict something like that. And you yourself, Mr. Bert Holtz, that's it. You yourself said very eloquently in front of us today that you wanted to do this right, and I agree with you. I think that's a great attitude to have. You don't want it, and we are a growing city. We're a growing town. We just completed a secondary plan. We want to make sure that when we plan these things, we want to do it right. I would actually prefer to err on the side of caution than anything else. I'm going to have to accept staff's recommendations. Whatever this council ultimately decides, maybe, you know, whatever that be. But I will not be supporting the motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Manuel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do support the recommendation. I think it actually strikes a balance. One, it places the onus on the applicant to justify, and it sounds like I think we can work collaboratively and try and find a solution. To thrust this into to approve as is when we know that there may be different numbers, I think could be also adding to the costs and the red tape. If we compel them to go through a minor variance process, both for the structure, the parking structure, as well as the number of spots, that adds to the costs. And I think what we should be doing is, one, if we can achieve this between now and Monday, I think we're all better for it. I think the applicant's better for it. I think our staff, you know, and in a perfect world, we could achieve some of these answers in advance of Monday. I know Councillor Sponga spoke to that. So that's my first hope. My second hope is, though, if that cannot be achieved, the way this motion is worded is that this project can't proceed without them being able to provide justification for the minor variance. It's also, without justification for the parking. It's also important to point out that even if we approve the higher standard, they could still go through that minor variance process anyway. So it's not like we're avoiding that or we're giving them the ability to go through that process. I think that's important information to clarify. But I think when we can streamline the process for the business community as well as the residents, because any cost we add to this process now, frankly, as we all know, gets passed on to the future tenants. So we all believe, I think there's unanimity around this table that we need to find ways to keep costs of housing and rental rates as low as possible. So in a perfect world, we can achieve some of this information in advance of Monday. Should that not be achievable, then with the H provision, the onus is really on them and demonstrating both to our staff, and if that cannot happen, it comes back to council, future council, for that decision point, and I'm quite comfortable with that as a way of streamlining this process to keep everyone's costs down. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bay.
Thank you. Just to echo some of the comments that have been made, certainly around this table, we're all in favor. We want to see rental apartment happen. I think all of us here have, at one point or another, many years ago, starting our careers, have rented, and we know how essential that is. That being said, we went through an extensive multi-year process on our secondary plan. And I do find it a bit disconcerting that the very first proposal, granted a very worthy proposal, comes to us and asks for an exemption. And that we're looking at creating an exemption on the very first proposal that's coming to us. And I'm personally very uncomfortable with that. I know you've gone back, you've looked at your site plan, you've tried to put in as much parking as you can. I'm going to ask that you revisit that. I'm very uncomfortable in going lower than the staff recommendations of 1.1. We went through an extensive process to get to that. That number was not something picked out of the air. While these specific numbers that we see in front of us here, some of them may be new, but I think similar. We looked at similar numbers, similar studies to help us come to our 1.1. I can't micromanage this. I can't sit down and look at your site plan, even though I may say at the top end on the west end, you might want to look at parallel parking. And what adjustments can we make, be it landscaping, buffers, et cetera, to try to accommodate more parking, because I think that's really the way to go. We need to find a way to get the parking there. All of us know as councillors, parking becomes a huge issue. I have one development in Ward 1 where it's already becoming an issue, where we as council felt that parking was inadequate. Our staff felt it was inadequate. Unfortunately, OMB did not see it the same way. And these become quality of life issues for people and will come back to us. And this is a case where, quite frankly, I can anticipate it happening. So I would like you to go back and look at your plan again, perhaps look at some of the buffering areas, et cetera, and work with the staff on that, see if we can find a few more parking spots, even if it's a parallel parking along sides that has reasonable access. So be creative on this. Just a bit of clarification now. Regional Councillor Taylor, and I did pay attention to your motion. I just have clarification now on the holding provision, because I think, Mr. Nethery, through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Nethery, you said that's fairly unusual to have a holding provision on a parking. Did I hear that correctly? I think it was about 30 minutes ago.
Mr. Nethery?
Holding is typically utilized to ensure things like site plan agreements or subdivision agreements are entered into, and allocation is provided. And so what that really means is that the internal elements of the design are finalized and that the site can be demonstrated to work. So it is perhaps not very common that you would be making use of some of the particular standards. And what I was really getting at is you can't have a range. You can't have one or the other. It's got to be one or the other. So that is the one element that is perhaps a little bit unique on this. So I'm glad to see that council's thinking about looking at a particular number and then asking the applicant through the H to justify the appropriateness of that to the satisfaction of the town engineering staff. That's what that means. And what it also means is that if it can't be provided, if that peer review by town staff can't come forward, then you'll have the opportunity to have another kick at it.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I think at this point I'd like to give staff and the developer a bit of an opportunity to look at the site plan, look at buffering areas, et cetera. Perhaps there is an opportunity for some parallel parking there. Perhaps you already looked at that, and I don't know the details of it, but take a second look. At this point, I am willing to support the regional councillor's I guess we call it additions or amendments. Amended recommendations, because we will have a second chance to look at it in about a week's time, and I hope something comes back and we do get a lot closer to that 1.1, because I think that's an important threshold, and that's what I would like to see you coming back at 1.1, looking at the different aspects of your site plan.
Thank you, Regional Councillor.
Thanks very much. First, a question again through to staff. If a 0.96 is what we've got as the holding provision, and in short order, if there's some ability to get more clarity by next week, that's great. But assuming it takes longer, if staff say, no, we can't support 0.96, but we do believe we can support 1.05, for example. Do you have the ability to do that? Or I think not, right? It's 0.96 or nothing, again, according to what you said.
Mr. Nethery?
Mr. Mayor, through you, I believe that's the case, and I'm speaking in the absence of having conferred with legal, but I think that is the case.
Can we look into, that's something area I think we can look into for next council meeting if we can't get resolution. And then I would also say to the proponent to give thought to that as well, where you want to set the bar, because then that's the bar. So, I don't mind working with you, but if it can't be justified, and so maybe one's better, maybe 1.02 is better, but you've got 7 days to figure that out, what you think you can truly justify and make this realistic, whether it can be or not, we'll see. And I would say this, that the secondary plan and its accompanying documentation is new, but nothing is ever perfect. And again, I will point out, our range is 1.1 to 1.15. For that building, that means the range is 247 parking spots to 258. I would, again, contend that that's barely a range. And I would say that, you know, with the first application, to amend it is not ideal, but I would also say the first application happens to be a rental. I mean, it's so rare in this region, and everything's based upon, not entirely, but largely the norm here, which is condos, which is somewhat different. And I think we have to recognize that. The last thing I want to say again, though, is, Wes, we do have expert staff advice, and we're not disregarding it. We're asking to take a little more time to look at more information. But secondly, expert staff advice, experts in the finance field also recommend our budgets, and we don't always vote in favor of our budgets, or at least not everyone does. So, but again, I really think the key here is that we're not disregarding this advice. We're simply putting a holding provision. We've got a week to sort of figure out where we want to be. And then at that point, if we go with the holding provision, is it up to the proponent to justify that number and make it a reality? And I do think that hopefully we can, in some period of time, either by the holding provision, find more clarity from the region with regards to the transit passes. That may shed some light on things as well. So I do hope people will support this, because I think it at least provides the opportunity to look at this more fully, to try to find a way to work with the proponent to bring to fruition a rental project that's dearly needed in this town and in this region. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the motion as amended, the recommendations, on the basis of a couple of things. Number one, this is a pilot project. And as a pilot project, we are involved in change leadership. And if my memory serves me correctly, transit-oriented development is development that is focused on transit and not on vehicles. And I identify, or I can see, that there is some risk involved in having the lower number. But that risk is fairly well contained. That's pretty much contained to the property that this development will be on. So I'll be supporting it. I'm hoping that we can get some resolution on a go-forward basis between now and the next council meeting that everybody is comfortable with. But in the meantime, we need to think about that there are some components of risk. Is it managed risk? Is it contained risk? And is it something that we're willing to undertake because we want to show some change leadership? So that would be the reason that I'd be supporting this. Councillor Hempin?
Thank you. I just have a question to staff. When we undertook our secondary plan or transportation model and came up with this determination for 1.1, was the transit considered along the corridors, Davis Drive and Yonge?
Mr. Heathery?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. But it was also considered in the time frame and the life of the plan. So in other words, it sort of acknowledged that there's a continuum between where we are now and where we will be in 2031, or it's build out at 2051.
So the recommendations for 1.1 consider the transit?
Today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Regional Councillor?
Yeah, don't want to belabor the point, but I do think it's an important point that we recognize that, I mean, we've had other developments in town where we've been concerned about parking. And, you know, it's a very different scenario whether you've got a development in town where a shortfall of parking is surrounded by public parking or town-supported parking, and where we would bear the consequences of that shortfall. In this case, as the mayor was saying, this is a contained site. The road access is Davis Drive, and there is clearly no parking on Davis Drive. If there's a shortfall, and I've got to believe these people who are pouring significant amounts of dollars into this are considering what happens if there's a shortfall. And they probably have more risk here than we do. There is parking maybe on some surrounding streets, but it's not too handy. And I have to say that in terms of paid parking, I actually believe paid parking is a good direction. I think it supports transit. It encourages people to think about things more in terms of transit use. And there's currently buildings right beside here of paid parking. And I don't believe to this point they're parking on streets across the way, but I could be incorrect on that. But hopefully that's something that staff would consider as well when we're moving forward on this.
Thank you. Councillor Sponga, then Councillor Hempin.
Yeah, I just want to say again that as the ward councillor, I've looked at that site and I've walked the back and spoke with many residents on site. And again, I have to reinforce the fact that parking on the development, the condo developments to the east is paid parking and it's controlled parking. So there isn't the availability for overflow parking from this development to take advantage of parking. It just isn't available. in the east property. We've never had an issue with overflow parking from the condominiums on Lorraine Avenue or Colgate. There's never been a concern in terms of that. And again, looking at this site, the only street that could potentially be impacted would be the industrial end of Wilstead, which at this point already is starting to see a transition, and a lot of those industrial activities sort of move away from there. And even having said that, it becomes quite treacherous to try to get from Wilstead over to where this development would be. The development is landlocked to the south. It's pretty much landlocked to the west. It has Davis Drive with a center median to the front. And so again, the only property that would really impact, and I've had several discussions with, is the Church of Jesus Christ. And that's why I raised right at the beginning during Mr. Barinholtz's presentation whether there had been a dialogue with that church, because if anybody is going to be impacted, it will be them. I look forward to the next week to be involved, looking forward to getting that information at the end of the week, but also continuing to look at that site and see if there's other opportunity, whether there is a real concern. And like you said, is there a mitigated risk? Is there a contained risk, a controllable risk, to ensure that at the end of the day we have the best outcome?
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. So we're at about 3:14. Might be appropriate to take a 15-minute break. We have one item and we have in camera. And, oh yes, and Councillor Sponga's motion. And the remaining item is item number 21. Let's just see if we can deal with that. Yeah.
Do you want, well,
Shall we try item number 21? We can deal with that in fairly short order, and Councillor Sponga's motion, then we can come back to the closed session after we take a break. So, depending on how quickly council wants to dispose of those two items, we could take a break in about 15 minutes. Next item then is item number 21, which is the report from Relief to Sign Permits. That's moved by, the recommendation moved by regional councillors.
I'd like to move a motion.
Oh, you'd like to move a separate motion? Okay.
So, yeah, thanks. I'd like to move the two recommendations that we have in front of us, and I'd also like to add a recommendation that council request that staff explore the feasibility and advisability of not enforcing time restrictions in relation to signs on Davis Drive during construction, during the construction period, and that staff inform council of their investigation and direction by memo, and inform the business community of the results as well as soon as possible.
Is there a seconder for those recommendations as amended? Councillor Twain? Okay. Jane, was that seconding it?
I was.
Okay, all right. Regional councilman speaking to it?
Yeah, very briefly, I think what we're doing a couple things here, but one is, I think, is recognizing that there has been some significant impact on the business community along Davis Drive, and that waiving the fees and waiving them retroactively is a show of support from the town, and hopefully some small gesture of financial support as well towards those businesses. Not to mention that there's a direct link between the impact and the need to market, et cetera. And so this is a way where we can do that. We've certainly invested in downtown Main Street in many ways, and that has been successful. But I think we need to also think of those kinds of investments in support of Davis Drive. I think the third recommendation that I added is also recognizing the impact and the need for enhanced marketing. And you know, the greatest argument against the greatest argument for our current bylaw as it stands is that we you know, you don't want to have a sea of signs all the time, and so we restrict the amount of times you can have a sign out for how long, et cetera. And it's largely an aesthetic. It's a visual impact. And I think I've said this before, but I believe that you know, a community that sort of tries to have a strong bylaw in relation to signs is a more attractive community. Having said that, I don't think anybody could make the argument that Davis Drive is attractive at this moment, and I don't think a few more signs is going, or longer up for signs is going to negatively impact the aesthetics to any great degree. And so I think it's another way to show support. This, I want to point out, this was brought to my attention, I think Councillor Sponga and Mayor Van Bynen and perhaps others, by some businesses on Davis Drive, that this was something we should be considering. And I gave it some thought, and we, you know, and I don't see, and I did chat with staff, and I don't see any big red flags on this. So I think it's just another way we can try to be as supportive as possible, and make some changes at this municipal level to allow those businesses to market as fully as they can.
Okay, thank you. Just a clarification, Regional Councillor, the recommendation that we have with this report, 2014-19 actually only has one recommendation, that we receive the reports.
Oh.
And the two items that you're referencing were
Thank
items that
you.
were adopted earlier.
Yes.
So your recommendation would be the second recommendation, one that we receive it, and secondly that we, okay?
Correct.
Are you okay with that as the seconder? Okay, all right. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Twinney, then?
I support, definitely support assisting this and ensuring that we help our Davis Drive businesses as much as we can. The only question I have, and I don't know whether we need it as an amendment or whether it can be through a direction to staff, is one of the items it includes, it's a scope and under scope and assumptions, number 1, it says billboards. And I don't believe billboards would be something that we should include in this. When you think about some of the billboards on Davis Drive, they are, you know, large entity businesses that are using those as a business enterprise. Are not actually businesses there. So they're, I think it's, can't remember the name of the one, there's that large one on Davis by the tannery there. There's one there. So I don't know if so it's just a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, how to either do it as amendment or whether we can just not include that. My other question, second question, would be with regards to the completion date. Are we talking about the completion date, all fees would be waived until the completion date of the whole project, including Yonge Street? So any, that would be 2018 it's showing on here.
My thought, Councillor, would be that once Davis Drive is complete, then it would apply only to Yonge Street, because then Davis Drive will have been finished. But it would capture both Davis and Yonge, but once the construction is done, then these variations would no longer apply to that area.
Is that what it means under the budget impact current and future? Is that that dollar amount assume that?
I think
Yeah,
it
okay.
does.
All right, just a
Yep.
question for that.
Go ahead.
Okay, so that answers that, but how about we deal with the billboards?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Twinney, these assumptions that are outlined in the report here are the assumptions that we were going under based on Council's resolution on the 8th of September, the last council meeting. And because there wasn't specific direction given to exclude one sign type over another, the assumption would be that the fees waived would apply to all sign types. So unless council directs otherwise, which if you're suggesting there should be an amendment. And on your other question, it was, as the mayor explained, it is the duration of time that the construction affects Davis, and then subsequently on Yonge. So it's only during the construction periods, and not, for example, if once Davis is completed,
Right.
then those businesses would pay the regular fees.
So could I add an amendment to it, so to the recommendations that it include, maybe add on the end, and that the relief from sign permits not to include billboards? Would that be sufficient, or?
Yeah,
You can
subject
wordsmith
to
that a bit?
if it could be included in to the consent of the mover.
Yep.
Okay, so I add that.
Is that friendly, John?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Sponga?
Thank you. I just wanted to, again, underscore the importance of this issue. I think the discussion was on the 18th initially was to provide some relief, Davis Drive, some of the businesses that contacted us that would have liked to have that relief, and I commend council for expanding that to Yonge Street once the construction moves over to Yonge Street. Having said that, I agree with the amendment that was requested from Councillor Twinney, and I see that I can support that amendment, given that billboards in itself is a business on Davis Drive, and I think that is important, that we support that as well. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Let's now go forward to regional reports. Notices of motion? None. Okay. Motions. Councillor Sponga.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to bring forth this motion and that it be referred to the 2015 budget. The motion being that staff report, the staff prepare a report that will review operations, GO Train operations, including east-west road connections, grade separation, speed within the downtown core, frequency of whistles at the train intersections located at Water, Timothy Street, and Davis Drive, and the implementation of a regulated signal pedestrian crossing on Water Street, Duncan Drive, and Ferry Lake. And my understanding is we can't move forward with that intersection because we're waiting comments and actions from GO Train. If I could speak briefly to the motion, Mr. Mayor, but I assume you'd like to get a seconder first.
That's correct. I thought your intent was to refer that to the 2015 budget. Okay, do you want to add that?
Yes, but I still need a seconder to speak.
Yep, seconded by regional councillor. Okay, speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're all very excited at the prospect of all-day GO Transit eventually, a GO Train within the next 10 or 15 years or so. And we've done a great job in planning how our corridors will be developed from now on to 2031. I think ahead of, I think this is the time, given the extensive studies that are going to be, that will have to be considered, to refer this item to the 2015 budget, because potentially traffic that could come through town every 12 and a half, 15 minutes could have a considerable impact on our municipality. We've heard before from Viva that there was language around a grade separation on Davis Drive, and the fact that at this point we only have one bypass or overpass on Queen Street, I think is something that the municipality is going to have to look at over the next few years, and that's why I think it should be referred to the 2015 budget. I'm confident, though, that we have great staff that has done this type of work before. I know the Director of Engineering has been involved both with Barrie and Markham reports. So I think we have the right skill sets and right personalities within our staff that will be able to make the right recommendations for the future.
Good, thank you. And to clarify, all of these items will be referred to the entire motion.
All of the all of those items will be referred to the 2015 budget.
Okay, thank you. Regional Councillor.
Thanks very much. I'll be brief, but I just want to say that I've been thinking about this lately a fair bit as well, and over the years, I think we all have. The fact is that the grade separation issue is an important one. The way, frankly, trains move through our towns and blow whistles is archaic. It's these wooden sticks come down and whistles wake up everybody in town, and we're moving to all-day GO. The disruption to residents, the disruption to traffic and congestion, the safety issues only multiply with that. And so this is something that just has to be addressed. I have spoken with our member of parliament, our member of provincial parliament in the past month or two, and spoke to them about my desire, and I plan to be bringing this forward more formally with them, but my desire to see the two levels of government partner with the lower tier in a funding mechanism, because frankly, the reason this is rarely addressed in other communities as well is because of the extreme cost of grade separation. It's a cost that rarely a lower tier municipality can bear. So I think if there could be through some of the federal, provincial funding opportunities related to infrastructure, a specific fund or funding dedicated to grade separation for emerging urban centers or for some based upon some criteria, where the three shared the burden, I think you could see this move forward more quickly on an issue that needs to be addressed, particularly with all-day GO train coming soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hempel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've also heard comments in regards to whistle blowing. As has been mentioned, we're going to see enhanced service over the future. And I believe now is the time that we start investigating ways of controlling that. I had the opportunity through a resident mention that the city of Cobourg no longer has whistles going off in their community. So I made the phone call to bylaws, and I spoke with their bylaw officer, and she confirmed that they do no longer have whistles going off in that community. I then spoke with the engineering department, and I spoke with their town engineer and went over the process. And the first step was to speak with the Ministry of Transportation. And the Ministry of Transportation actually came out to that community and had a look at ways of stopping the whistle, but creating security measures and safety nets for the community. There were costs involved. So I'd ask that staff maybe give Coburg a call and maybe look into ways of accomplishing that for our community, or bring it forward to council. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And in addition to the whistles themselves, there's going to be a huge impact on traffic congestion when the frequency of the trains come by. So it's going to be a complex issue that will give you a challenge, but we've got the right people to look into it. So I'll support the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. Let's take a break then, and maybe reconvene. I have 3:28, so let's 3:45. Yeah, sure, let's do new business. We've got a few minutes, I guess, if you'd like to. Councilor DiMuccio?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Shelton, the CAO, earlier last week, we received a confidential memo on the Glenway Westlands, and I had asked you what provision you were using to make that confidential, and you gave me a reply today, and I wasn't satisfied with the reply, and I asked you and the solicitor to make certain details of that memo public, and I gave you the reasons why, and I have still not received an answer from you. So would I be able to receive an answer from you today in public or between now and the next council meeting?
Mr. Sheldon?
Mr. Mayor, I believe I did send a response for the reason for that being a confidential memorandum probably around noon or so.
Yep, and did you receive my response right away?
I have not seen that, no.
Okay, well, I sent you and the solicitor a response, so I'll give you some time. You don't have to discuss it now, but I would like to have an answer. Thank you.
Okay.
In the end, I think it would need to be a determination of this council as to whether or not the matter stays confidential. So that might be a matter that should be discussed on an in-camera basis, because if we're going to have a wholesome discussion about that, that's where it should be, because it's property negotiation. Okay, thank you.
Perhaps, Mr. Mayor, that if you wish to do that, that could be subject to the clerk's direction included in today's closed session discussion.
Okay.
Actually, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I didn't mean to get out of the queue. You can have any discussion here confidential, but I believe, and I've received advice, that information is not confidential, and that's what I'm challenging right now. Thank you. And I'm still waiting for the provisions.
Yeah, there is a
to provide.
process for challenging that.
Well,
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I agree, but
Okay.
I'm telling you that I wasn't satisfied with the provision that was cited. So the reality is that you might think that some things are confidential, but the reality is there are rules in place that show that illustrate what is confidential versus what is not. And I've received advice that is not confidential. So
Thank
that's
you.
what I'm challenging. That's what
I
I'd like an
appreciate
answer to.
I
Thank you.
appreciate your concerns. The CAO acts on the direction of this council, and it is what council's direction is that the CAO will respond to, and that will be the majority of council. Councillor Sponga.
Yes, two very brief items. I was going to raise again for the third time the fact that I had requests from the residents for an information report, or if I could provide them with some information on how our bylaw enforcement department is enforcing the train's whistleblowing at times that are covered by the bylaws, but my understanding is that is more extensive than we thought, and it's not as simple as writing me 2 paragraphs. So that item is now being reviewed both by corporate services and engineering, and I'm looking forward in getting a response soon to that. And so thank you for staff for working diligently on that. The only other item that I have under new business is I wonder if I could request, please, not at this point, but maybe not just to myself, but to all of council, if we could get an update on the Andrew Street reconstruction. It just seems like this project is taking a life of its own, or a very long life of its own. And so if we could get an understanding of what measures are being undertaken to ensure the speedy completion of that project, and I understand that some of those issues may rest with contractors, so I'm looking forward to getting some information that I can provide to the residents.
Just be an information report.
Information report.
Thank you. Regional Councillor?
Thanks very much. I just want to speak to the issue of the Glenway information being in camera, out of camera. Obviously, staff provides us with legal advice, and council, though, is ultimately the one that decides whether something is in camera or out of camera. But a suggestion that something is improperly in camera is obviously a serious one, and there is a process that one can appeal through if they feel that is incorrect. But I guess what I would say is to Councillor DiMuccio, I would assume if you have argument and advice, which you've spoken to, the advice you have about that should not be in camera, that you would be sharing it with your colleagues. I'd leave that up to you, whether that was in camera or out of camera, but that would be helpful for us to also when we're making our final decision about in camera and out of camera.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor?
Discussion, I would certainly be willing to make that, share that, but I also know the rules, Mr. Taylor, and I also know that this council previously was not understanding the rules when it came to in-camera meetings. So for you to suggest that we have the answers to everything is completely incorrect. We have a record of sometimes not getting things right, and I'm not making any suggestions of what you had suggested that somebody's. I certainly don't think you're hiding. I would certainly hope you're not hiding anything. But I can tell you right now that just because the solicitor would cite a provision that I don't agree with and that a professional that I spoke to doesn't agree with, doesn't mean that you're right. And it is not council's decision. On the contrary, that decision comes to people that have higher authority, like in-camera commission, we have people like integrity commissioners that come in and decide whether that is right, not yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. And again,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I look forward to receiving that information, and I think that would be useful to all of council. Councillor DiMuccio, can I just ask through you, Mr. Mayor, if the clerk can verify that it is council that decides whether we're in camera or out of camera, because I've been told I'm incorrect on that.
That's not what I said. Point of privilege. That is not what I said. I said it's up to the commissioner to decide whether we did the right thing about going camera.
Okay.
If somebody
Sorry,
wants to challenge that,
okay.
and that's what I'm challenging.
I'm going to put a stop to this discussion now because it's just a matter of opinion. And what we will rely on is the opinion of our solicitor and the direction that the majority of this council provides to our CAO. And so that'll conclude that discussion. I'll take a 15-minute break. Okay. Okay, members of committee, I'll call the meeting back to order. The only item remaining at this point is their closed session. So if I could have a motion, please, to go into a closed session to deal with the closed session report 2014-21 regarding the proposed disposition of land by the municipality in Ward 3. Also, closed session report 2014-23 regarding the potential acquisition of land in Ward 5, and closed session report 2014-24 regarding litigation before the Ontario Municipal Board with respect to 536 and 550 Mulock Court. Could I have a motion to that effect, please? Councillor Kerwin, Councillor DiMuccio, all those in favor? Thank you. Yep. I don't need to take this off. We're not streaming media. It was initiated by residents and not by us? Okay. Some more, are those additional? That's interesting. Okay. Ready? Okay, I'll call this public hearing session for Committee of the Whole to order. Madam Clerk. System's not, oh, okay. Push a button.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Committee of the Whole meeting. The Planning Act requires the town to hold at least one public meeting on any proposed Town of Newmarket zoning bylaw amendment. The purpose of this public meeting is to hear from anyone who has an interest in the application for a zoning bylaw amendment at 345 to 351 Davis Drive to permit a 40-unit stacked townhouse development. The Committee of the Whole will not be making a decision regarding the proposed application tonight, but will refer all written and verbal comments to planning staff to consider in a report that will be brought forward to a future Committee of the Whole or council meeting. If you wish to be notified of subsequent meetings, or if you are making a presentation today, please complete a form with your name and address and submit it to the clerk's staff. Please note that in accordance with the Planning Act, the Ontario Municipal Board may dismiss an appeal without holding a hearing if the appellant failed to make either oral submissions at the public meeting or provide written submissions to council prior to the adoption. We thank you for your participation and interest in this meeting.
Thank you very much. We'll start off with a presentation from the proponent. So if the proponent is here, if you can introduce yourself, we permit up to 10 minutes for the presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Great. My name is Andrew Forensic. I'm a senior associate with Walker Najagizovic, better known as W&D Associates. With me I have Laura Calvin from our office. She's a planner. She'll be assisting me with the presentation. In the audience with me we have Reza Eslami from Icon Architects. We have Henry Verbruggen from EMC Group. And they'll be here to address any questions that may arise specific to their areas of expertise. So the purpose of my presentation today will be to provide an overview on the development for 345 to 351 Davis Drive, after which we'll be available to answer any questions. And I'd like to start off by just orienting us as to where the site is. It's located on the north side of Davis Drive, about 40 meters west of Vincent Street. And that's about 1.2 kilometers east of Yonge, about 300 meters west of Main Street, and about 450 meters from the GO station. The site's about 3,200 square meters, about 34,800 square feet. And just moving on to the aerial photo, which gives us a bit of a context feel for what's on Davis Drive today. Davis Drive today contains a mix of residential and also commercial uses and some institutional uses, and of course transit as well. And it's got currently a very auto-oriented character, a lot of parking in the front. Up until recently, really, not much of a pedestrian realm, and that, as we know, is changing. We also have some apartment buildings located to the west, a cluster of about 6 or 7 of them, approximately in the 8 to 10 story range. And I'm just going to cycle through some of the site photographs, because I know everyone's probably very familiar with the site and the area. These were taken last week, so they're quite new. The orange boundary indicates the approximate boundary of the site, and we see to the east we have the existing house that's been turned into a Tai Chi studio, and to the west a piece of the church. And this is taken looking east on the site, right at the boundary with the church. Just maybe cycle through those. And this would give you a feel for what the site kind of looks like if you're standing at it from that position. This is looking south from the site at the current works that are ongoing on Davis Drive. It shows the mall across the street, and if we just pause here, we can see the surrounding character is evident here, and the taller apartment buildings to the west. Next. Now this is a view looking east down Davis Drive as the work's currently underway. And this is looking west back towards Yonge Street and the church. This is the church that's immediately to the west. And this is the house that's currently on the property, known as 351. My bad, that was 345. And
this is the Tai Chi, isn't it?
And this is the Tai Chi studio to the east. And this is just another photo that I decided to include that continues to show the context as Davis Drive is evolving into a corridor with transit and pedestrian connections. You see the lady having probably a hard time walking on the street right now, but that's going to change in the future. Next. So just to give an overview and a policy context for the subject site, there are 3 layers of policy that apply. The first layer is provincial in nature, and it deals with the provincial policy statement, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and also the big move, which is put forward by Metrolinx. Then we have the York Region official plan, and of course we have the Newmarket municipal context as well with the official plan and an emerging secondary plan. Next. So in terms of the provincial plans, the provincial policy statement very broadly promotes intensification, intensification especially within existing settlement areas, efficient development and reuse of resources, and encourages transit and development along where transit is being developed. The growth plan, and this is an excerpt from the growth plan, very, very high-level document, provincial planning document that indicates that we are very close to an urban growth center, which is on Yonge Street. This is not in the growth center, but it's very close to about 300 meters west of where the growth center, or east of where the growth center boundary is. And the growth plan designates this as a major transit station area associated with the GO station, and as well as with the bus lanes on Davis Drive, which, when complete, will actually be a form of rapid transit, which would play into that major transit station area designation under the provincial rules. Next. And this is the excerpt from the Metrolinx plan. There's a little blow up on the right-hand side of the screen because it's hard to see. But the site is located on a corridor that is right in between 2 mobility hubs that have been designated by Metrolinx. And one is the GO station, it's the white one, and the black one is the Newmarket Center. So it's really a corridor that links two of these nodes, important transit nodes. And this is an excerpt from Viva Next, showing that the Viva lines are to be completed in 2015, as we know, with the next section to be completed along Yonge Street. Actually, if we could just go back one. What this shows is the proximity of the stations that are being proposed at Main Street and also at Parkside Longford. Next. Moving into the York Region planning context, the subject site is located along a regional corridor. Now, regional corridors are areas where the region has identified as appropriate for intensification, new growth, and really one of the areas, one of really the few areas in the region framework where substantial development is to be channeled, and that is to be channeled there in more pedestrian-oriented fashion. Urban design is a very important factor, and downplaying the importance of automobiles is very important, developing a sort of culture of transit. Next. And moving into the Newmarket context, the site is designated an urban center, and the urban center designation allows for a wide range of uses: commercial, residential, institutional. Also, once again, calls for good urban design, street enclosure, creating a sense of when you're walking on the street that there's a street edge to it. downplaying the parking in front of buildings, making it so that when you're walking, you don't just see parking lots, you see a street edge, as you do in older parts of the city. Sorry, next. Thanks. And this shows within the Newmarket proposed secondary plan, which has been approved by council but is now with the region for approval, how the site relates to that. So this is located along Davis Drive in what's called the Huron Way neighborhood. Next. It's located in a mixed-use area. Next. And now we get into the very specific nitty-gritty of the designation. So it's in the light blue area, which for the audience is very hard to read or impossible. But to sum it up, the designation that would be proposed through the secondary plan would allow a minimum of 2 stories and a maximum of up to 8 stories of height with bonusings, or 6 stories without bonusing. So that's part of the plan framework, and the densities are called for from a range of 1.5 to up to 2.5. 2.5 being associated with additional bonusing, where you could get an 8-story building with 2.5 FSI. Next. This shows the site is split zone currently. The site is zoned urban center UCR. The west side of the site is currently zoned only for commercial uses as a result of a recent, relatively recent rezoning of the site. That portion of the site, if we'll go to the next slide, on the left what I've done is list what the current zoning permits for 345 Davis Drive, which would be the site to the east, the portion of the site to the east. There's a range of residential and commercial uses that are permitted, including apartment buildings, up to 6 stories approximately of height, 18 meters, and a maximum density of 1 FSI. And for 351 Davis Drive, which is the west portion of the property that has been previously rezoned for commercial, there is no residential currently permitted. It's offices, pharmacies, medical labs or clinics, personal service shops, coffee shops, those types of uses, in approximately 10.5 meters of, or 3 to 4 stories of height, 10.5 meters being the max. So what's being proposed? The proposal is a 3-story stacked back-to-back townhouse development. It's comprised of 2 blocks that are connected on or located on top of an underground parking garage with 40 units comprised of 4 1-bedroom plus den units, 32 2-bedroom units, and 4 3-bedroom units. So predominantly 2-bedroom units, larger units of approximately 1,000 square feet. Total gross floor area is about 42,800 square feet, which translates into a floor space index of 1.35. And for those in the audience who may not be familiar with the concept of floor space index, it's how much of the development, how much of the interior floor area of the development relates to the site, size of the site. It's a ratio to express the density of the site. So in this case, there's 1.35 times the area of the actual land on the property.
Okay, I have you at 11 minutes now.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just finishing up.
I'll ask council for an additional 5 minutes.
Oh,
just for
thank you.
Okay, all those in favor?
My apologies.
That's okay, thank you. Good.
And
Go ahead.
there are 50 underground parking spaces proposed, 40 of which would be residential spaces, 10 of which would be residential visitor spaces, and that ratio would comply with the requirements, Newmarket requirements. And there's a contemporary architectural design that's proposed, and I just have some renderings that I'd like to show, if you want to cycle through those. This is a more technical site plan before I move on to the renderings, which shows that there's been definitely thought put into how the access occurs with a turnaround for fire trucks and loading vehicles, moving vehicles, etc. Davis Drive being on the right-hand side, so south is on the right, north is on the left. There's a setback of the back block of 12.25 meters from the rear property line, which creates a separation distance with a landscape buffer as well. that would be planted with a number of maple trees. There's a central courtyard which units would front onto. This is a back-to-back stacked townhouse development, meaning there are units along Davis Drive, there are units along the back of the first block facing into the courtyard, and then in the second block there are units facing south into the courtyard and also facing north into the landscape buffer. Next. And this is seen a little bit better in these renderings. This is looking to the northeast along the future Davis Drive. Now, of course, we haven't rendered all of the beautiful improvements that will occur on Davis Drive once it's fully planted, but this gives a feel of what that might look like. Certainly there will be more vegetation. Next. And this is just moving as if you're walking on the other side of the street. Next. Giving a feel of what it would look like, some steps leading up to the access to the lower and the upper suite. There is a lower suite, 2 levels, and an upper suite, 2 levels. And a portion of the lower suite would be in the subgrade area. Next. This is a bit of a bird eye view looking into the site facing west, into the courtyard area. Next. And this is a better view of that courtyard area as if you were standing on the north block facing west. Next. And this is another view into the courtyard area. Next. And another view into the courtyard area, showing how it would be greened and used as an amenity space for passive enjoyment. Next. And next again. This is a view from the rear. This would be a view from the landscape buffer looking to the southwest. So that gives an idea of what the back of the development would look like with units that don't have backyards but actually face into that area. Next. And this slide we've included to provide an indication of what the materials would be. This time are proposed to be brick, wood patterned aluminum siding, white stone, and metal railings and aluminum windows. So those are the general materials that are proposed. And next slide. And just in summary, in terms of the rationale for the appropriateness of the development, in our opinion, it represents a modest intensification within the designated regional intensification corridor. It's in proximity to the growth center and the GO station, and it's along Davis Drive with the new BRT being proposed. It's a sensitively designed intensification in the urban center designation, which is one of the land use designations that is intended to experience that type of growth in Newmarket. And it meets the general intent of the Newmarket Urban Center secondary plan as well. It will support the development of a mixed-use community along Davis Drive, which is the ultimate goal of the policies of both the town and the region. And it will create a pedestrian-friendly street facade along Davis Drive. It will encourage walking, enhance safety because it will have passive views onto that street. It won't be a sort of a scary place to walk. It will be a much more inviting place to walk. And it also represents a lower ground-related scale type of development within a context that is planned to accommodate quite a bit more height, quite a bit more density over time. This is probably one of the first developments to really come in under the new sort of framework that's being developed now. So it's really sort of setting the preliminary tone for creating that streetscape. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Okay. Well, maybe, given that this is a public meeting, we'll start off first. We'll hear from any members of the public that would like to ask some questions, and we may have to ask you back to respond to some of those questions, and we may need to refer those questions to staff. So we'll start with, if I could ask you to have a seat then, and is there anyone in the audience who would like to come forward and ask any questions of clarification or identify any concerns that they may have? Okay, there being none at this point. Oh, go ahead, sir. Yep, please give us your name and address, and
yeah, my name is,
come on over here and sit on the seat. This way we can hear you better. And your name and address, please.
my name is Pablo Pina, and my address is 33 Vincent Street. My question is, I noticed a setback on
Maybe if you address council, and then we can hear what you're having to say, and then they'll be able to hear you.
Sorry?
Go ahead. The microphone is here in front of you. It's on. It's
Okay.
on. Okay, if you'll address council, please.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
My question is on the west side. I didn't notice any setbacks. It looks like it just goes straight up. I'm just wondering about the lot beside to that one. And if all this complies to the zoning on the lot, the survey.
We can have Mr. Nethery deal with that question then. Okay. Ms. Plant?
Mr. Mayor, yeah, the application is requesting relief from the normal setback, which I believe is 3 meters. And I'm trying to read the plan here, and I'm not catching the setback, but it's quite a bit less than the 3 meters required by the current zoning bylaw.
Okay.
So they're asking for relief from that particular setback
Ooh.
on the west side.
Okay. And also, like the shadows, like 3 stories in that area, would it interfere with the neighbors on the north side? And the type of, the finish, the details, is it high-end residential or mid-class to not affect the value in the surrounding area?
We can come back to those either from the proponent or from our staff. Okay, any other questions?
That'll be all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else who has any questions? Yes, sir. Name and address, please, for the record.
Yeah, it's John Dawson, 60 Harrison Drive. I just found out about this, coming here for some other reason, but there was something up about the back of the building, they call it the landscape something. I couldn't quite get what that is. Faces onto Penn, I think.
Landscape buffer, was that the
Is that what they
term?
called it? What is that and how big is it?
Okay. Ms. Pont?
Through you to Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Dowson. Yes, if we could get the site plan back up there again, perhaps that would be helpful. Just trying to see which one is the better one. There.
Nope.
Back one. There you go. Yes, you can see from that, Mr. Mayor, that there is parking coming around toward the back, but then there will also be a landscaped area in conjunction with that. It's not showing up very well on the site plan. It's probably best shown through the landscape plan. But there will be some plantings at the rear of the building in addition to the access to the underground parking. Yes, to the left of that drawing.
That's the left in the drawing, right?
Yes.
Which is facing on back Penn.
It's,
So is that a space between is that what you're talking about?
yes, the space between the back of the second block
Yeah, that's the one.
and the residents' backyards that front on Amelia, which is the backing street.
How big is that?
Um,
How wide is it?
I should have brought a different plan with me, but it looks to be about 12.5 meters.
That's it?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else who has any questions? Okay. Maybe what I'll do then is I'll ask the proponent to come back then and talk about the western side yard setbacks, although I believe that was addressed by Ms. Plant, about the shadow casting and the finish and the quality of the finishes. If you could
Certainly.
address those questions.
Number one, with respect to setbacks, the site plan is difficult to read at this scale, but on the bottom of the drawing, that would be the western
So
setback.
If you could use the mouse and move the
Oh,
mouse around, you could
absolutely.
point that out. There you go.
There we go. So here would be the western setback. That's proposed at approximately, 0.5 meters, so half a meter. And the rationale for having a reduced side yard setback, especially along Davis Drive, is in time, the hope is that there would be a consistent streetscape that is created by further development to the west. So let's say, the church or a portion of the church property, since that portion of the property is sort of undeveloped at the moment, would also develop with a similar reduced setback to start to create that street edge that our cities used to have, but over time kind of lost. And that's the vision for the Davis Drive corridor. With respect to shadows, I actually have included shadow studies at the end of my presentation because I had a feeling it might come up. So I'll just run to those. And sometimes they're hard to decipher, and definitely they'll be hard to read at this scale, but I'll attempt. So these are the shadow studies. Now, what these are showing is for the month of March 21st, which is the equinox. It's one of the test periods when both day and night are equal. These are test periods for shadows that are recognized internationally, I would think, as a standard. And what it shows on the bottom left is at 8 a.m. on the one to the here, let me use the mouse. This one here is showing the 8:30 a.m. shadows, and what it's indicating is the sun rising from the east and longer shadows that quickly at 10 o'clock, 10:12 a.m. recede and are limited to the site itself within that landscape buffer. Going to this shadow plan at 12:12 p.m. Once again, the sun is quite high in the sky and does not create any shadowing on adjacent properties. At the 2:12 scenario, the shadow starts to move onto the east side of the site. And again, on the 3:40 scenario, we see that there's very, very limited shadowing on the adjacent property, which is also a future a potential redevelopment site for a similar type of development or even a greater scale of development as the secondary plan would permit. So what this is trying to show, and this was part of our application requirement, is that there is not an impact created on the rear yards of the Amelia properties in this recognized test period. There is also the June period that's been tested, and in June, of course, the sun is higher on the horizon, and there is even less shadowing. And in fact, in many of these, it's hard to even discern the shadows at all until very late in the day. And once again, those shadows will fall onto the adjacent property to the east, as opposed to on the property to Amelia. So there will not be any impacts on the low-rise residential neighborhood to the north. With respect to the finishes, I'll take you back to this slide, which shows the range of finishes that are proposed. It's not just one type of finish, but a variety of materials have been proposed to create visual interest and to be aesthetically pleasing. There's brick, which is found in the community, of course, wood pattern aluminum siding to add some interest there, and white stone, which are sort of completes the predominant range of materials. We have our architect here as well. If you'd like more information on some of the finishes and perhaps the longevity of the finishes or anything to do with that, he may be able to speak to that if it's desirable.
I think the question was with respect to high-quality finish.
I can't speak to the quality of it as a planner in terms of the longevity of it. I'd have to refer to our architect to speak to that if you may allow that.
Mm-hmm.
Reza, would you like to come up for a moment? Just to speak to the quality of the finishes.
Sure. The brick that is chosen is a clay brick. The specific brick that we want to use is this beautiful brick, which has iron spots in it. It's Endicott, and now different manufacturers are producing that. But essentially, it's a clay brick. The stone is a stone. It's a precast stone. It's white, and the manufacturer is Permacon, and these are all local suppliers that have these, and the wood panel is actually aluminum. We see a lot of use of wood in all the buildings, but we know that how difficult it is to maintain the real wood. But we found this product, which is also Canadian, which is called Longboard, and these are aluminum panels which have wood grains on them. So they last. It's aluminum, you know how long it will last, and these are the products that each of these are warranted by the manufacturers for 10, 15 years. So these are not the type of materials that you would see in a single-family house. It's a condo corporation, and there's a standard that has to be followed in terms of the materials, the quality of materials, and the workmanship that has to go into these buildings.
Good, thank you. Any questions from members of council? Councilor Maino?
Just a question, and it's often one that comes from residents, and I think the last gentleman might have been getting at. Have you determined what price point yet the range of units will be at?
I'm not aware of any price points that have been chosen at this time. We would still need to finalize the rezoning and site plan process. I haven't been advised, so I can't speak to that.
Is there a sense, through you, Mr. Mayor, if all goes according to your plan with respect to rezoning, what the timeline would be from your end if approvals are in place for when construction would commence?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I am not aware of any timelines for construction. I believe that the marketing would need to take place first before any construction is commenced. And sales have not begun, to my knowledge. And I would think that a construction period for a development like this would be a year and a half to 2 years for the length of time that the construction would continue once it begins. I would assume, and I'm only assuming from speaking to my client, that they'd like to begin as soon as possible. So once the approval is granted, which probably would be the spring, that would be an ideal time to start marketing and move to construction quickly, assuming sales go well.
And one thing, and again, this is still got to go through the approvals, but should there, just because when you're dealing with new construction adjacent to established neighborhoods, I think it's important to note, and I don't know if our staff want to speak to this briefly, but how a construction, I guess noise mitigation, things like that, how that would work. If our director wants to comment.
Mr. Nethery?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the typical approach that we deal with this kind of a site plan application would be to require the applicant to enter into a construction management plan, which sets out everything in terms of the management of how the construction is being handled there, hours of operation, porting, fencing, safety concerns, fouling of the roadway and that sort of thing, as well as the provision of some information noticeable on site with a 1-800 number or something of that nature, so that any resident can actually get on the horn to someone at the applicant's site office to immediately notify them that there is an issue. The town would, of course, be involved in that exercise as well. That's been a requirement of the typical sort of urban site plans for a number of years now.
Thank you. Thanks, sir. Through you, just as it's my last question, as part of the site plan process, which this would have to go through, that's when we would approve landscape buffering, trees along, say, the northern boundary, correct? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hempel.
Thank you. Could we see the photo of the northerly part of the building facing north?
Sure.
And the top of the building, I believe there's a... So what's the proposal for the very...
There we are. That's the rear.
Right. So on the very top of the third story, I saw you had like a bit more of a top view on some of the other photos that you had there.
Sure, I'll go back to the bird's eye view. That might help to
Perfect.
identify it. This one?
Yes. Those are proposed to be patios at the top?
That's correct. So each unit would have a rooftop patio with accessible space on the rooftop, on the flat roof.
Do you know the height of that?
The height of the whole development is 13.7 meters. The specific height of that portion, I will.
I think it's going to look very top. I was gonna
We have a full set of plans with us, so we can get you that answer.
And where's all the mechanical, the HVAC equipment going to be placed on these units?
That'll be inside this the rooftop pop-ups.
Okay, if you can just show us with the mouse, that'd be great.
Sure, in these units here.
Okay. And will that be visible to the residents at the north side?
Will it be visible
Yeah,
to the
mechanical.
residents on Amelia Street?
Yes.
We haven't done a view from the backyards to see what would be seen from the backyards. So we haven't,
Okay.
and with the landscaping that's in place, there would be a green buffer there as well.
Okay, it would have been helpful if we had some kind of, I don't know, view shed analysis, some kind of view from the top of the building or from the building looking down towards the property or vice versa, so that people here can understand how their property is going to be affected. And hopefully that can be provided and shared with the residents. Now, when we were dealing with the secondary plan recently, we looked at angular planes and things like that. Is this, through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, does this conform with our secondary plan on the northerly portion of the building?
Ms. Blunt?
Through you to Councillor Hempen. I actually haven't done an angular plane calculation on this one. That would be something that we would ask the proponent to do.
Okay.
And ensure that it meets the provisions of the secondary plan.
Okay. And what is the minimum required setback to the property to the north, the properties to the north?
Now, this is a situation where we
bylaw.
we don't have a street we're not sharing a street, so it's not the 22 degrees, so it's a 45-degree angular plane.
Okay, and sorry, and setback from the properties, the northern properties, from the back of their building, a setback requirement and distance?
They're meeting that rear setback at the moment.
Okay.
With this proposal. They're not asking for relief from the current zoning provisions.
The required setback is 9 meters. We are providing 12.5.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess what would be really helpful is to see that view shed analysis so we can see that, and also to see if it conforms with our angular plane. And when will we, for you again, Mr. Mayor, when will we be seeing the report coming to council and something more constructive that the residents can also see?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hempen. If things tick along the way they should, we hope to have this back at the next regular meeting, which is in December, I believe.
And the residents will be notified at that time and have an opportunity to comment again?
Yes, they would, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Regional Councillor?
Thanks. Can you go back to the north, the back slide? Thanks. So to the point that Councillor Hempen raised, so it'd be helpful at some point to see a bit more of some views or something that gives a bit of a context from the rear yards and the houses of the Amelia Street residents. How high is that wall at the top that those rooftop decks are in?
So the entire height of the building from grade to the top of that pop-up is 13.7 meters. The height of that pop-up on its own is
11 meters.
So what I'm actually wondering is, what's the height, if you're standing in a rooftop deck, what's the height of the parapet?
The height of the parapet is 10.7 meters, which is as per building code.
10.7 meters, no. So it's a rooftop deck. If you're standing on your rooftop deck, how high is the wall, the parapet
The parapet
wall?
is about this.
That's what I'm getting at. Okay. So I would think that depending on what the analysis shows, the view sheds, some of the more detail on the rears, I would think you might want to give consideration to these units. I think only the rear-facing ones, but Amelia Street you're going to have people standing on a rooftop deck looking out and straight into people's backyards and onto their decks. And I think it may, you know, I think we should give some consideration to, if this moves forward, but give, I think you would want to look at some sort of screening or something. I think the other areas are probably not necessary, or I won't say for sure, depending on what the analysis shows, but I want to just put that out there as something that should be given consideration if this proceeds.
More so than a vegetation buffer, because during the winter months, unless it's coniferous trees or something like that. Yep. Yeah. So that'd be something to be addressed in the site plan process as well. Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir. Please come forward. Great seats here.
My name's Mr. Arendi, and I live at 63 Denny, just up the road from the Amelia crowd. From the side profiles, I want to know why the rear building is so much higher than the front building. Why don't they sink it down, which would solve a lot of these privacy issues? Why do they have it a two-tier sort of approach?
Okay. I'll ask the proponent on that, but maybe I'm not reading it correctly, but I thought both units were the same height.
Can you bring up the side profile? Like it looks like it's about 8 feet higher, and that's 8 feet less building I got to look at.
No, you are correct. It is higher. This.
Okay. How much higher? Do you know?
One.
Okay.
About 8 or 9 feet. Gentleman's correct. About 8 or 9 feet. And where I'm pointing to with the mouse here shows the grade difference. And there is a slope up, and that's a result of the lay of the land. And there is actually substantial grade difference between this site and the church as well. So there are varying grades in this area. So the height of the building itself is the same as the front one. It's just that it's positioned on a higher piece of land.
Doesn't look like it. Well, the overall effect is it's going to be 8 or 9 feet higher at the back when you don't have to have that. You could grade it such that they're both the same height, which would go a long way. And the other thing is, I don't know if you've considered it, but if you build a half meter from the property line, you can't service the side of that building. You can't paint it, you can't fix it, you can't do anything. So you should have your minimum 1.5 meter, whatever it is, between the west property line and the side of your building. These are two things I just wanted to share with council. It's not really a question, it's more of a statement, but I just wanted to get it out there.
Well, and I think staff will need to address some of those observations in their report when it comes back to council. So the other thing that I would suggest is that anyone who has an interest in this process, leave your email address or your address with the clerk's office, and when the reports are prepared by staff, that you'll get a copy of those reports and you'll be able to attend. And I'll have our Director of Planning outline what the next steps would be and what the reasonable timelines would be for that, so you would know when to look out for any further, or the next stages and the next steps of this process. Any other questions? Yes, sir?
Mr. Mayor, may I stay up here in case I need to answer?
Okay, all right. Manage the mouse there, okay?
Mr. Mayor and the staff, two questions came to my mind.
Yes.
The water situation, I noticed the roof is more like a Mediterranean, and the draining, where would it go and where will it flow? And the traffic, because it's going to go onto Davis Drive, which is very busy, and would it require a traffic light, which is very close to main drive? Will it have an impact?
All right, thank you. We'll answer those questions in terms of drainage. Has that been addressed, Ms. Blount?
Mr. Mayor, I'll let Andrew take that question because he's probably much more familiar with the stormwater management plan than I am at this point.
Okay, go ahead.
We have submitted a stormwater management plan. We have submitted our site plan application, so that is under review. And we have received comments from staff. We'll have to address all the comments to ensure that we meet all the standards. It isn't, an option. We definitely will accommodate our stormwater as per the requirements. We have our engineer in the audience, and I can't speak to all the technical aspects of it, But we are, the site does have quite a bit of soft landscaping, as well as where the rooftops are flat, it would channel the water and deal with it in a way that controls flow in the appropriate way, as per standards. And your other question was with respect to a traffic light. There is no traffic light proposed and none necessary at the driveway.
Yep. This is a right-in, right-out access as well.
Yes, because of the bus lane.
Because of the bus lanes, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I noticed there's a grate there in the back, it goes towards the back lots. Would that have an impact on your neighbors?
That's correct. There is a grade difference, and I don't have the plan in front of me. I do have it with me. We can share it with you after the meeting if you wish, and our engineer can perhaps explain to the gentleman a little bit more. If his property is perhaps on Amelia and he's concerned about it being affected, we can show him that in person.
Drainage in any event needs to be addressed as part of the stormwater management
It does.
plan. Okay, that's good. Okay, good.
That's all.
Thank you. All right, would be appropriate then at this point to receive all of the deputations, to receive the presentation, and and there are a number of items in correspondence that we've received. We've received some questionnaires that have been completed and submitted to us, as well as some correspondence from York Region with respect to that, including some comments from Judith and Jack Duncan on Amelia Street. So if I could have a motion then, please, to receive the presentations, the deputations, the correspondence, and the petitions. Okay, Councillor Manuel, Councillor Begg, all those in favor? Okay, and before we adjourn, Mr. Nether, maybe if you could just do an outline in terms of the decision points and the opportunities for further input from members of our community.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. What we will need to do is to, first of all, bring a report back to Committee of the Whole with a recommendation. Now, the timing of that is a little uncertain. Marion had mentioned that the very next meeting is, I think, December. So that would be the very earliest that we would be able to bring it back before you. So I guess that's after the election and after the new council's installed. That assumes that all the technical issues are solvable within that time frame. So that at that Committee of the Whole, whatever recommendation flowed out of that would need to go to a subsequent council meeting that might be a week or two after that first Committee of the Whole. And if council were of a mind to approve a bylaw for it, that's subject to a 20-day appeal period. So I'm talking about well into the new year now. So at the very earliest, I wouldn't expect to see a council approval of anything until January or February. There would be an appeal opportunity that would provide for that 20 days. And so I'm guessing somewhere around March, which would then enable the processing of the site plan application sort of coincident with the consideration of the zoning bylaw. And I had mentioned an appeal period, so if it turned out that council approved something, but there was a resident or a ratepayers association that were concerned with it, or indeed if council turned it down, the applicant could launch an appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board, and then that hearing would take place whenever the province decides to schedule that hearing. They're typically in the 6 to 8 to 12-month time frames.
So the next report, which would come to Committee of the Whole, could be circulated to anyone who leaves their name and address with us.
Sure.
And you have the opportunity to attend at the Committee of the Whole when the report comes forward, and then also to attend at council, and also in the event that if you're not satisfied, there's still the appeal process. So there are 3 key decision points and input points for the members of the community as we go forward. Okay. Having said that, any further questions? Motion to adjourn then. Councillor Manuel, Councillor Twinney, all those in favor? Thank you, that is carried.